Hello there, and welcome to The Sleepy Scientist. I'm glad you're here. Tonight we'll be gently drifting through one of the most extraordinary places on Earth, the Amazon rainforest. A place where the trees hum with quiet communication, frogs wear their own camouflage, and rivers carry more than just water, they carry life itself. Don't worry, you won't need to pack a raincoat or bug spray. Just settle in, let your shoulders relax, and we'll let the forest do the whispering. Before we start wandering under the canopy, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from? And what time is it there? Is it just past dinner? Midnight snack territory? Or are we brushing up against 3 a.m., that magical hour where socks disappear and the fridge hum starts to sound like it's whispering secrets? If you enjoy these slow science journeys, a gentle like or a sleepy little subscribe would mean the world. It helps this channel reach more sleepy minds just like yours. No alarms, no stress, just quiet curiosity. Now I'll do my very best to keep things relaxing. But fair warning, the Amazon is so full of fascinating life that there's always a chance it might accidentally keep you awake. If that happens, well, at least you'll wake up a little wiser. This video is designed to help you unwind, rest, and maybe even drift off. But please remember, this is not medical advice, just calm, cozy science for the curious mind. Let's go back in time, way back. Not just a few centuries or even a few millennia, but tens of millions of years. Picture a world where South America is drifting like a sleepy continent across the globe, slowly inching into position. There are no humans yet, not even monkeys swinging in trees, because there are no trees. Not the lush green ones we think of anyway. In this ancient landscape, most of what we now call the Amazon rainforest doesn't exist. It's not even a forest yet. It's just the murmur of possibility in a warm, evolving world. Back then, the land that would one day become the Amazon basin looked very different. It was part of a sprawling, flat floodplain, often underwater, shaped by the immense force of shifting tectonic plates. To the west, the Andes Mountains, those great stone spines that now guard the Amazon's edge, hadn't fully formed yet. But deep underground, geological drama was unfolding. The South American plate was slowly colliding with the Nazca plate, and the pressure was beginning to push rocks skyward. As the Andes began to rise, they started altering the entire layout of the continent. Before they towered over the landscape, water from the interior of South America flowed westward, draining into what's now the Pacific Ocean. But as those mountains grew taller and stronger, they blocked the westward flow of rivers like a slowly rising dam. Eventually, water had nowhere to go but the opposite direction. Rivers reversed their course, spilling eastward into the Atlantic. This remarkable change carved the pathways for what would become the Amazon River, the mighty backbone of the rainforest we know today. But that wasn't all. Around that same time, roughly 55 million years ago, something green began creeping across the land. The climate was warm and wet, a greenhouse world where plants thrived. Angiosperms, flowering plants, were evolving in droves. They began filling every available niche, carpeting the land in dense vegetation. With each passing epoch, vines, trees, and shrubs claimed more territory. Rain fell often and heavily, and the green blanket grew denser, darker, and taller. Over time, these plants formed what we'd eventually recognize as rainforest, multi-layered, humid, and teeming with life. It's easy to think of the rainforest as eternal, but the Amazon is actually a work in progress. Over millions of years, it has been shaped and reshaped by a shifting Earth. Climate changes have expanded and contracted its boundaries. Ice ages caused it to shrink into isolated forest islands, where species were forced to adapt in pockets. Warmer, wetter periods allowed it to sprawl out again, reconnecting these biological islands and creating new opportunities for evolution to run wild. The soil of the Amazon might surprise you. Despite the overwhelming greenery above, most of the soil is actually quite poor in nutrients. Unlike the dark, loamy soil found in temperate forests, Amazonian earth is often red or yellow and surprisingly thin. Why then does it support such overwhelming biodiversity? The secret lies above the soil, in the forest itself. The ecosystem is incredibly efficient at recycling nutrients. When a leaf falls, or a creature dies, fungi and microbes break it down with remarkable speed. Nutrients are quickly absorbed by shallow roots and reused in the living structure of the forest. It's like a giant vertical composting machine where nothing goes to waste for long. Now imagine this world as it might have looked about 10 million years ago. The Amazon River is running eastward toward the Atlantic, having reversed its course completely. The Andes stand tall, catching moist air and creating rainfall that feeds the river basin. The forest is now a vast and vibrant mosaic, one of the largest tropical ecosystems the planet has ever seen. It stretches across what today includes 9 countries, covering millions of square kilometers, and in this ancient green sea, life is bursting at every level, from the lowliest fungi to the largest land mammals in South America. Interestingly, the Amazon's formation wasn't just a quiet natural affair, it was a geologically noisy, muddy, and rather soggy process. Many areas that are now forest were once vast wetlands or shallow seas. Fossils of ancient fish and marine creatures have been found deep in the heart of the Amazon, hinting at a time when much of it was underwater. This watery history influenced the shape of its biodiversity. Many of today's fish, amphibians, and aquatic insects evolved from ancestors that once swam in a completely different world. Some researchers believe that this long-standing connection to aquatic environments is part of why the Amazon basin is home to so many water-loving species today. Over 3,000 freshwater fish species swim through its rivers and tributaries, more than in any other river system on Earth. Some breathe air, some eat fruit, some are electric. Evolution has had time and space to get very creative here. The rise of the rainforest also changed the global climate. As vegetation spread and intensified, it began to pull vast amounts of carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. The Amazon became not just a local ecosystem, but a global player. It helped cool the planet and regulate rainfall patterns as far away as North America and West Africa. Even now, much of the rain that falls within the forest isn't imported from the ocean. It's recycled moisture, released from the leaves of trees and drawn back down by the heat of the sun. In this way, the rainforest quite literally creates its own weather. It's also worth noting that the Amazon didn't evolve in isolation. It is part of a much larger story of life adapting to change. Species came and went. Some survived the ice ages by burrowing deeper into the forest. Others rode out long droughts in wetter pockets. Some flew, swam, or scuttled their way across natural bridges to other ecosystems. What emerged is a living legacy, a place so complex and ancient that scientists are still discovering new species here every few days. And then, much more recently, humans arrived. We're relatively new to this forest. Evidence of human activity in the Amazon goes back more than 11,000 years. Far from being untouched wilderness, parts of the forest have been carefully managed and even shaped by indigenous peoples for millennia. They cultivated certain plants, created fertile patches of soil, and understood the cycles of the forest with a precision that modern science is only just beginning to appreciate. So the next time you imagine the Amazon, don't just think of it as a place of trees and rivers. Picture it as a long, slow symphony of geology, climate, water, and life. An ancient unfolding that has never truly stopped. A place still growing, still shifting, still whispering its secrets into the damp air. A forest born of upheaval, carved by water, and perfected by time. If the Amazon rainforest is the beating heart of South America, then its arteries and veins are formed by the rivers that flow through it, and none is more powerful, more sprawling, or more influential than the Amazon River itself. This isn't just a river, it's a continent-spanning force of nature, carrying more water than the next 7 largest rivers combined. If rivers had resumes, the Amazons would be absurdly overqualified. Let's start with some perspective. The Amazon River stretches over 6,000 kilometers from its headwaters in the Peruvian Andes all the way to the Atlantic Ocean on the eastern edge of Brazil. That's about the same length as the distance between London and New Delhi, or if you prefer a cozier comparison, roughly the same as stacking over 500,000 garden gnomes end to end. Not a measurement you'll find in textbooks, but visually effective. What's even more astounding is the volume of water this river moves. During the rainy season, The Amazon discharges over 200,000 cubic meters of water per second into the Atlantic. That's enough to fill more than 80 Olympic-sized swimming pools every second. The flow is so powerful that fresh water from the river can be detected over 150 kilometers out into the Atlantic Ocean. It's like the river is reaching out, politely diluting the salty sea. But the Amazon River didn't always flow east. In its earliest days, the water actually drained westward toward the Pacific. That changed dramatically once the Andes Mountains began rising around 10 million years ago. As the Andes pushed higher into the sky, they formed a kind of wall that blocked the westward drainage. Water, ever persistent and not particularly bothered by mountains, eventually rerouted itself and began flowing in the opposite direction, toward the Atlantic. This reversal gave birth to the modern Amazon River and redefined the geography of the entire continent. The river doesn't travel alone either. It has an enormous support system, a network of over 1,000 tributaries that snake and twist their way through the rainforest. Of those, at least 17 are over 1,000 kilometers long themselves. The river basin, which includes all these tributaries and the land they drain, covers more than 6 million square kilometers. That's nearly the size of Australia. You could drop several European countries into the Amazon basin and still have room for a decent-sized nap. Within this vast drainage network are rivers of many personalities. Some are fast and narrow, cutting through dense forest like liquid blades. Others are wide and sluggish, sprawling out into floodplains and wetlands. And during the rainy season, many of these rivers rise dramatically, sometimes by over 10 meters, spilling into the surrounding forest and transforming it into a massive aquatic jungle. Trees become islands, fish swim between trunks. Entire ecosystems change their shape, as if the forest is trying on a different outfit for a few months. Among the most fascinating parts of the Amazon River system are the so-called white water and black water rivers. These aren't names from a fantasy novel. They describe the color and chemical composition of the water itself. Whitewater rivers, like the main stem of the Amazon, are heavy with sediments, giving the water a milky or muddy appearance. These rivers carry eroded material from the Andes and are rich in nutrients. Blackwater rivers, on the other hand, such as the Rio Negro, are dark like tea. The color comes from tannins and organic matter leached from decaying vegetation. They're low in sediment and nutrients, and they flow more slowly, with an almost glassy smoothness. There are also clear water rivers that, as the name suggests, look nearly transparent, with golden, sandy bottoms visible beneath the surface. Each of these river types supports distinct ecological communities, with different fish, plant life, and microorganisms adapted to the water's specific chemistry. One of the most remarkable features of the Amazon River system is the flood pulse. Each year, rainfall in the Andes and throughout the basin causes water levels to surge. The floodwaters spread out across huge swathes of forest, creating what's known as the Varzea, seasonally flooded forest. For much of the year, these forests are dry, but during the floods they become part of the river, and fish move in to feed, breed, and explore what are essentially underwater tree houses. Some fish species, like the tambaqui, even feed on fruits that drop from the trees into the water. It's like an all-you-can-eat floating buffet. Fish in the Amazon are not your average goldfish. The river basin is home to more than 3,000 freshwater fish species, many of which exist nowhere else in the world. You'll find the arapaima here, one of the largest freshwater fish on the planet, growing up to 3 meters long. There are piranhas, though they're far less dramatic than Hollywood would have you believe. They do have sharp teeth, but most of them are shy, schooling fish that eat fruit and seeds along with the occasional insect or small animal. There are also electric eels, which aren't eels at all but knife fish, capable of delivering jolts powerful enough to stun prey and sometimes unwelcome researchers. The river isn't just home to fish, it's a whole aquatic civilization. Giant river otters patrol the banks in family groups, chirping and snorting like furry speedboats. Amazon river dolphins, also called botos, swim through the flooded forests with remarkable agility. These dolphins are famously pink, due to blood vessels near the surface of their skin. and while the shade varies with age and activity, the result is undeniably eye-catching. In Amazonian folklore, these dolphins are often said to be shapeshifters, capable of transforming into charming humans who sneak into villages and cause mischief. Whether or not you believe the legends, it's hard not to be enchanted by creatures that seem so perfectly adapted to their watery, labyrinthine world. Above the water, birds like kingfishers, herons, and egrets scan the surface for movement. Some swoop down with sharp precision, while others simply stalk along the banks with dignified patience. Reptiles such as caimans and anacondas glide silently just beneath the surface, a reminder that in the Amazon there's always something watching. And then there are the insects. Mosquitoes. Yes, endless, enthusiastic mosquitoes, but also dragonflies that dance over the river like flying jewels, and water striders that skim the surface tension with the confidence of tightrope walkers. For many indigenous communities, the Amazon River is both a highway and a provider. Canoes made from hollowed-out logs have traveled its tributaries for thousands of years. The river offers fish, water, transportation, and connection. Settlements along its banks often rely entirely on the river for their way of life. It's not just a body of water, it's a calendar, a compass, a pantry, and a storyteller. And it never truly sleeps. Even at night, when the sky turns inky and the moon glints off the surface, the Amazon continues its tireless journey to the sea. Insects hum, frogs call, owls hoot. Beneath the surface, catfish probe the murky bottom, and river dolphins swim silently among the submerged branches. The river's always moving, always breathing, a thread stitching together the past and present of one of Earth's greatest natural wonders. It's not just a river, it's a liquid memory of mountains, forests, and rain, a connector of life and landscapes, and it continues to shape everything it touches, from the smallest algae clinging to a rock to the vast canopy reaching toward the sun. In most parts of the world, when it rains, it's because clouds have been drifting over from the ocean, full of moisture they picked up on their way across the sea. That's the classic water cycle. Evaporation, condensation, precipitation. Simple, neat, and satisfying. But in the Amazon, things get a bit more interesting. Here, the forest itself becomes a kind of engine for rain. It doesn't just receive water from the sky, it helps make the rain happen in the first place. The Amazon rainforest, in a very real sense, rains on itself. Let's start with the trees. They don't just passively sit there waiting for weather to happen. Trees in the Amazon are busy all day long, drawing water up from the soil through their roots. And we're not talking about a trickle. Each tree can suck up hundreds of liters of water every single day. That water travels upward through a complex network of xylem, tiny tube-like structures inside the trunk and branches, and eventually escapes through tiny pores in the leaves. This process is called transpiration, and while it might sound like a tree just sweating politely, it's actually a major atmospheric event. All across the Amazon, trillions of leaves are engaged in this act of botanical evaporation. The water they release rises into the air as vapor, helping to create the thick, humid blanket that hovers over the forest. It's estimated that over half of the rain that falls in the Amazon has been recycled from the forest itself. Moisture evaporates, forms clouds, and falls back down as rain, only to be absorbed and released again. It's an elegant loop, like a natural misting system on a truly epic scale. This cycle is so powerful that scientists often describe the Amazon as a biological pump. The trees pull moisture from the ground and push it into the sky, where it travels with the wind and helps sustain rainfall far beyond the forest borders. Some of this vapor even finds its way across the continent, feeding rain systems in the Andes and as far away as Argentina. It's like the rainforest is secretly a weather factory, quietly influencing climates thousands of kilometers away. One of the more poetic terms used to describe this process is flying rivers. These are not literal rivers, of course. You won't need an umbrella for a cloud, but they are vast atmospheric currents of water vapor that flow through the sky, pushed along by prevailing winds. These flying rivers can carry more moisture than the Amazon River itself. If you could see them with the naked eye, they'd look like invisible ribbons of mist weaving their way through the atmosphere. Satellites, of course, can see them quite clearly. From space, the Amazon's vapor plume stretches out in ghostly tendrils, drifting toward the southeast with quiet determination. Rainfall in the Amazon doesn't follow the kind of rigid schedule you might find in more temperate regions. Instead, it arrives in patterns that are both predictable and wonderfully chaotic. There is a wet season and a dry season. Although dry is a relative term, this is still a rainforest after all. Even in the drier months, rain is never far away. But during the peak of the wet season, usually between December and May, the skies open up with regular intensity. Thunder rumbles, clouds stack like cotton towers, and rain falls in heavy warm sheets that drum against the canopy like a percussion section gone slightly overboard. The canopy plays an important role in shaping how the rain actually interacts with the forest. When those tropical showers arrive, not all the water immediately hits the ground. The upper layers of the forest, those high-reaching branches and thick clusters of leaves, intercept much of it. Some of the water evaporates right there on the leaves, while the rest trickles down branch by branch, vine by vine, in a leisurely descent toward the forest floor. This process is known as canopy interception, and it means that a raindrop falling on a treetop might take several minutes to reach the soil below, if it ever makes it at all. When rain does reach the ground, it doesn't just soak in and disappear. Because the soil is often thin and poor in nutrients, much of the water is quickly taken up by shallow roots. Some of it pools in hollows and low-lying areas, forming temporary ponds and muddy wallows. During the wettest months, entire regions of forest become flooded, creating the aquatic wonderlands known as varzea. In these flooded forests, trees grow with their trunks underwater, and fish swim through the understory like it's just another part of the river. The connection between the forest and its rain is so intimate that scientists worry about what might happen if the balance is disturbed. Deforestation, for example, doesn't just reduce the number of trees, it interrupts the whole rainmaking mechanism. Fewer trees mean less transpiration, which means less moisture in the air, which in turn means less rain. And with less rain, the remaining forest becomes drier and more vulnerable to fire and drought. It's a feedback loop, but one that spirals in the wrong direction. Some climate models suggest that if deforestation exceeds a certain threshold, somewhere around 25 to 40% of the forest, the Amazon's water cycle could break down entirely. This could lead to what scientists call savannization, where large parts of the rainforest could shift into a much drier, savanna-like ecosystem. That would not only mean a dramatic loss of biodiversity, but also a serious impact on regional and global climate. The flying rivers would slow or vanish, rainfall patterns would change, and even distant agricultural systems could feel the effects. Of course, it's not all doom and gloom. The rainforest is resilient, and restoration efforts are gaining ground. Planting native trees, protecting watersheds, and recognizing the rights of indigenous peoples who've managed these forests for generations all help to support the delicate balance of the Amazon's water cycle. In many ways, the key to keeping the rainforest green is to let it do what it does best: grow, breathe, and rain. And it really does rain. The sound of rainfall in the Amazon is something special. It starts gently, like distant whispers on the leaves, then builds into a steady rhythm, a natural lullaby. Occasionally it arrives suddenly, with a crack of thunder and a dramatic downpour that feels almost theatrical. But even then, there's something calming about it. It's the sound of life being replenished, water returning to water, a forest talking to itself in liquid syllables. When you consider that every raindrop has likely passed through a leaf before hitting the ground, it's easy to feel a kind of quiet awe. The Amazon doesn't just live in its water, it is its water. A self-sustaining system of cloud and root, mist and branch. An enormous breathing organism that reigns from within. Walking into the Amazon rainforest is not like entering a forest in the traditional sense. You don't just step into a collection of trees, you step into a vertical world, a living skyscraper with life packed from the soil beneath your feet all the way up to the sun-drenched treetops. It's a forest with multiple floors, each with its own residents, rules, and rhythms. If the forest were a hotel, it would be fully booked on every level. Let's begin at the bottom. The forest floor is a world of shadows and secrets. Only about 2% of sunlight makes it down here, filtered through layers of leaves above. As a result, it's surprisingly dim and relatively open, not the tangled jungle often imagined in adventure novels. The undergrowth is sparse in many places, as plants that need a lot of light don't have much chance to thrive. Instead, fungi, mosses, and shade-loving plants make their homes here, along with a wealth of insects and detritivores, creatures that feed on dead matter. This is where decomposition takes center stage. Leaves fall, fruits drop, animals die, and within hours, nature's cleanup crew is on the job. Fungi break things down, ants march off with pieces of organic treasure, and beetles do what beetles do best: chew, scavenge, and disappear. The nutrient cycle here is fast and efficient. The Amazon's famous biodiversity depends on this process because the soil itself is not especially fertile. Nutrients are stored not in the ground, but in the living biomass above it. It's a bit like living in a house where everything valuable is up on shelves, and the floor is mostly just there to catch the occasional spill. Moving upward, we reach the understory. This layer sits above the forest floor but below the dense canopy. It's a murky, humid space filled with shade-tolerant plants, young trees waiting for their shot at sunlight, and a wide array of animals that prefer a bit of privacy. Frogs, snakes, small mammals, and a surprising number of bats make their homes here. The air is thick, not just with moisture, but with the quiet hum of movement. Wings fluttering, leaves rustling, something unseen dashing from branch to branch. This is the realm of ambush and camouflage, where predators wait silently and prey tries not to make a sound. Plants in the understory often have broad leaves to catch as much of the limited light as possible. Some have developed glossy surfaces to repel excess moisture, because even in the shade, the rainforest never really dries out. There's also an impressive collection of climbing plants and vines, collectively known as lianas, which use the trees like natural elevators. Instead of spending decades growing a thick trunk, they hitch a ride up someone else's. It's an efficient strategy, one might say opportunistic, with some vines growing dozens of meters long, twisting and looping like jungle spaghetti. Higher still, we find ourselves in the canopy. This is where the rainforest really comes alive in terms of energy and activity. The canopy is a dense, interwoven layer of leaves and branches that captures the bulk of the sunlight. It's often compared to the roof of the forest, but it's more like a bustling metropolis. Here, life is loud, colourful, and competitive. Birds call, monkeys chatter, insects buzz, and the air is a blur of movement. Every square metre is hot real estate. Canopy trees usually reach heights of between 30 and 45 metres, with some stretching even higher. Their branches often interlock with those of neighbouring trees, creating a continuous platform of greenery. From above, it looks like a vast undulating green carpet, but from within, it's a chaotic maze of twigs, flowers, fruits, and creatures. This is where many animals spend their entire lives without ever touching the ground. Howler monkeys roar to declare territory. Sloths, ever the introverts, move slowly and deliberately, covered in algae that gives their fur a greenish tint. Excellent camouflage, albeit not the most fashionable. Toucans with absurdly large beaks hop from branch to branch, and parrots zip through the air like living crayons. The canopy also plays a critical role in the rainforest's water and carbon cycles. Leaves here absorb carbon dioxide and release oxygen, while also releasing water vapor through transpiration. It's a busy place, photosynthetically speaking. The sheer surface area of all these leaves contributes enormously to the rainforest's ability to regulate climate both locally and globally. Climb even higher, and you reach the emergent layer, the penthouse of the forest. These are the tallest trees, some reaching 60 meters or more. They rise above the canopy like green towers, their trunks thick and often buttressed to support their height. These trees face the full brunt of the elements: direct sunlight, high winds, and pounding rain. Only the toughest species make it up here, and the animals that inhabit this layer are equally specialized. Birds of prey, like harpy eagles, patrol the emergent layer, scanning for movement below. Butterflies drift upward in lazy spirals, and bats often roost in the high crevices of exposed branches. From this vantage point, one can see just how vast the rainforest is. It stretches in every direction, an unbroken sea of green, interrupted only by rivers and the occasional clearing. For the species that live here, the world is sky, leaf, and wind. Each of these layers, the forest floor, understory canopy, and emergent layer, functions like a distinct neighborhood. They host different communities of plants and animals, each adapted to the specific conditions found at that height. Temperature, light, humidity, and even wind exposure vary dramatically from bottom to top, creating microclimates stacked on top of one another. This vertical structure is one of the reasons the Amazon is so extraordinarily diverse. It's not just about how far the forest spreads out, but how deeply it stacks life within itself. A single hectare of rainforest might contain hundreds of different tree species, each with its own shape, height, and ecological niche. Multiply that by the millions of hectares that make up the Amazon, and the scale of complexity becomes almost unfathomable. Interestingly, many of the animals and plants in one layer may never interact with those from another. A frog that lives on the forest floor might never meet the monkey that lives in the canopy, or the eagle that flies above the emergent trees. They inhabit different vertical worlds, each with its own set of rules and dangers. This partitioning helps reduce competition and allows more species to coexist within the same geographical space. And then there are the connections, vines that link canopy to floor, birds that travel between layers, and falling fruit that nourishes creatures below. Seeds drop, fungi bloom, insects migrate up and down the trunk highways, and the whole structure breathes together as one giant, interconnected organism. The next time someone says the rainforest, it's worth remembering that there's no single forest to speak of. There are many forests stacked one atop the other, each with its own stories, sounds, and inhabitants. It's not just a place, it's an architecture of life, built leaf by leaf, branch by branch, and occupied by a cast of characters as rich and varied as any mythical kingdom. Only here, the dragons are replaced by tree frogs, and the royalty are crowned in moss. There's something quietly extraordinary about the Amazon's weather, and it starts with the fact that this enormous rainforest never really has a proper winter. While most of the world shuffles through the seasons like a wardrobe, swapping out snow for sun and leaves for flowers, the Amazon hums along at a steady, sultry rhythm. It's a place where summer never ends, and the air always carries a whisper of rain, even when the skies are clear. Lying almost directly on the equator, the Amazon enjoys a pretty consistent climate all year round. Temperatures hover between 24 and 30 degrees Celsius most days, which is warm but not blisteringly hot. It's not the kind of heat that scorches the soles of your feet on the pavement. It's more like walking into a greenhouse where the thermostat is permanently set to jungle. But while the temperatures are steady, the rainfall is a little more nuanced. Rather than the classic four-season model used in temperate regions, the Amazon experiences a wet season and a less wet season. Dry season is a bit of a misnomer. It still rains, just not quite as much. Typically, the wet season runs from around December to May, depending on the specific part of the basin. During this time, the rain is frequent and often intense. Skies darken quickly, clouds gather with theatrical flair, and thunder can roll across the canopy like distant drums at a jungle concert. Rainstorms in the Amazon have a certain flair for the dramatic. They don't always start politely. One minute it's muggy and bright, and the next a wall of water drops from the sky like someone tipped over a cloud. These tropical downpours can be fierce, but they often don't last long. Within an hour, the sun might peek out again. The forest resumes its buzz and chirp, and the air is even steamier than before. It's a cycle that repeats with such regularity that many of the forest's inhabitants have evolved their routines around it. Some frogs time their mating calls to start just before the first raindrop falls, as if nature had handed them a waterproof stopwatch. Interestingly, the Amazon's cloud cover has a peculiar daily rhythm. Most mornings begin bright as the rising sun starts to evaporate moisture from the canopy. By early afternoon, that moisture has built up into thick clouds, By mid to late afternoon, those clouds often burst into rain. It's a dependable pattern. Humid morning, cloudy noon, rainy afternoon, clearish evening. It's almost polite, really. You could set your watch to it if your watch were humidity-proof. Humidity, of course, is the Amazon's signature scent. Step into the forest, and the air wraps around you like a damp blanket that's been warmed in a microwave. Humidity levels often stay between 80 and 90%, which is excellent for orchids and tree frogs, though perhaps less delightful if you're trying to keep a neat hairstyle. But this moisture isn't just a side effect of the climate. It's a key part of what makes the rainforest function. That sticky, saturated air helps drive transpiration, the water cycle, and even the distribution of nutrients. The whole place runs on vapor. Sunlight here is also a bit different from what you might expect in such a wet place. Despite the rain and clouds, the Amazon still gets a generous dose of sunshine each year. The equator doesn't play favorites with the seasons, so day and night are almost equal in length, roughly 12 hours each, throughout the year. There's no long summer twilight or winter darkness, just a regular, dependable pattern of light and dark, like nature's own time clock ticking away over the treetops, and that light hits with purpose. When the sun does shine, it does so directly, with rays beaming nearly perpendicular to the Earth's surface. This creates intense bursts of heat and energy, which fuels the rapid growth of plants. Photosynthesis doesn't need to take a coffee break here. Leaves are busy converting sunlight into sugar, feeding not just the trees themselves, but, indirectly, the entire food web. In fact, the Amazon is one of the most productive ecosystems on the planet, thanks largely to this steady solar input. Plants grow quickly, animals have plenty to eat, and energy flows through the system like caffeine through a rainforest espresso machine. It's a place where life seems to accelerate, even as the humidity encourages everything to move a little slower. Of course, the climate isn't identical everywhere in the Amazon. The rainforest is so vast, spanning across parts of 9 different countries, that microclimates abound. Western regions near the Andes receive more rainfall than the eastern stretches near the Atlantic. Some areas are more prone to seasonal flooding, while others stay drier year-round. Elevation plays a role too. The higher you go, the cooler and cloudier it gets. In some upland areas, you might even need a jacket at night, though don't expect any snow unless you're scaling the Andes with serious altitude. There's also an intriguing atmospheric phenomenon known as the Intertropical Convergence Zone, or ITCZ if you like your weather acronyms. This is a band of low pressure that circles the equator, where trade winds from the northern and southern hemispheres meet. It's a bit like the atmospheric equator, and it shifts slightly north and south throughout the year. When the ITCZ passes over the Amazon, it brings with it enhanced rainfall and convection. In essence, it's one of the major players behind the Amazon's wet season. Without it, the forest would be a lot less rainy and a lot less green. But even paradise has its problems. In recent years, parts of the Amazon have experienced unusually long dry spells and rising temperatures linked to global climate change and deforestation. These shifts not only threaten the health of the forest itself, but also its ability to generate rain and regulate temperatures. When too many trees are cut down, the local climate can begin to shift, less transpiration, fewer clouds, and eventually less rain. It's a delicate balance, like a rainforest tightrope walk conducted in flip-flops. Despite these concerns, the Amazon's climate remains one of the most stable and biologically productive on Earth. Its constancy is part of what allows such diversity to flourish. Plants don't have to endure harsh winters, and animals don't need to migrate long distances or grow fluffy coats. Instead, the forest allows for specialization, fine-tuning, and elaborate ecological relationships. For the creatures who call it home, the Amazon is a place of predictable unpredictability. You can count on rain, but not exactly when. You can expect warmth, but also the occasional storm that feels like the sky's giving the forest a very enthusiastic bath. It's a world where the air is thick with life, and the weather is less a backdrop and more a character in its own right. Persistent, generous, and sometimes dramatically over the top. Living in a place where it's always summer might sound like a dream, and for the Amazon, it mostly is. There are no frosts, no blizzards, no piles of autumn leaves to rake up. just a perpetual state of warmth and growth, where rain falls like a drumbeat and the sun presses down through the canopy with steady devotion. In this never-ending summer, the Amazon thrives, swaying gently to the rhythm of light and water, season after endless season. If you were to measure the success of an ecosystem by how many species it can squeeze into a given space, the Amazon rainforest would win hands down, probably while holding a trophy made of lianas and hummingbird feathers. It's not just diverse, it's the undisputed heavyweight champion of biodiversity. This vast green mosaic is home to roughly 10% of all known species on Earth. That's right, 10%, all packed into a region that makes up less than 5% of the planet's land surface. Clearly nature got a bit carried away with the creativity here. Let's start with plants, because frankly there are a lot of them. Scientists estimate that the Amazon contains more than 16,000 different species of trees alone. That's not even counting shrubs, vines, ferns, orchids, and all the other botanical personalities in the mix. To give that some perspective, most European countries are lucky to boast a few dozen native tree species. In just 1 hectare of Amazonian rainforest, which is roughly the size of a soccer field, you might find over 200 different tree species growing together. Imagine going for a walk and encountering a new tree every few steps, all doing their own thing with leaves, bark textures, fruit shapes, and wildly different strategies for staying alive. The competition for sunlight is fierce, and that drives a lot of this diversity. Some trees grow tall and fast to outcompete their neighbors. Others play the long game, slowly inching upward while investing in dense wood and deep roots. Some produce toxins to keep animals from nibbling on their leaves. Others entice those same animals with fruit, hoping their seeds will be carried off and deposited in a fresh patch of soil, preferably with a nice helping of fertilizer included. The result is a forest that's not just crowded, but cleverly organized chaos. And where there are plants, there are insects, millions and millions of them. The insect population in the Amazon is almost impossible to count accurately, but estimates suggest that there could be over 2.5 million insect species in the region. In a single tree, researchers have found as many as 150 different species of beetles. That's one tree. One beetle might mimic a wasp to avoid predators. Another might look like a bit of lichen. Some are masters of disguise, others are boldly coloured as a warning, and some are just weird little engineers building traps, tunnels, or sticky nets. Butterflies flit through sunlit clearings with wings like stained glass. Leafcutter ants form superhighways across the forest floor, hauling bits of leaves many times their own weight to cultivate underground fungus farms. Mosquitoes hum a little too enthusiastically in your ears. Dragonflies patrol near water, swooping like tiny helicopters. Everywhere you look, something is buzzing, creeping, gliding, or doing a small but oddly impressive acrobatic feat. Birds also have a strong presence in the Amazon, and not just a few kinds. There are well over 1,300 bird species here, ranging from tiny jewel-like hummingbirds to enormous harpy eagles with talons the size of a house cat's paw. Parrots squawk from treetops, not out of impoliteness, but because volume is a survival strategy when your habitat is a 3-dimensional maze of trees. Toucans flash their oversized beaks in a riot of color, while kingfishers dive headfirst into the river with shocking precision. Even birds that don't look particularly fancy often have songs so complex you'd think they were auditioning for an avian jazz band. Among the trees and vines, monkeys form a particularly noisy part of the population. There are over 100 species of primates in the Amazon, and they come in all sizes, colors, and attitudes. Howler monkeys, for example, have vocal cords so large they can be heard up to 5 kilometers away. Their calls sound like something between a lion's roar and an angry trombone, and they're used mostly to shout, "This tree is mine!" at rivals across the canopy. Capuchin monkeys, on the other hand, are the clever tool users of the forest. They've been observed cracking nuts with stones, using sticks to fish for insects, and probably judging nearby researchers with side-eye. Squirrel monkeys move in large troops, chattering and swinging through the branches like a pack of caffeinated gymnasts. The diversity doesn't stop with the visible. Microorganisms in the Amazon soil play an enormous role in nutrient cycling. Fungi decompose dead matter with ruthless efficiency. Some form symbiotic relationships with tree roots, trading nutrients for sugars. Others wage microscopic wars that we're only beginning to understand. The Amazon isn't just busy above ground, it's humming with life beneath your feet too. And of course, there are reptiles and amphibians. Frogs here are particularly famous, especially the poison dart frogs. These tiny, brightly coloured creatures carry enough toxin to make a predator think twice, assuming the predator lives long enough to regret its decisions. Interestingly, the frogs don't produce the poison themselves. It comes from the ants and other small invertebrates they eat, which means their diet directly influences their toxicity. A frog that moves to a new habitat and changes its menu might lose its defensive edge. Evolution with a side of dietary caution. Snakes slither quietly through the undergrowth or curl up in the branches. Some are venomous, some are constrictors, and many are masters of camouflage. The emerald tree boa, for instance, lounges in coils on a branch, its vivid green scales blending perfectly with the leaves around it. Caimans and anacondas patrol the rivers and flooded forests. The green anaconda is among the heaviest snakes in the world, capable of taking down prey much larger than itself with a subtle method of hugging it extremely hard. And then there are the mammals. Jaguars, elusive and powerful, tread softly through the shadows. Though rarely seen, they leave behind signs. Paw prints in the mud, a scratch on a tree, the occasional low growl in the distance. Tapirs, odd-looking and surprisingly graceful, trundle through the underbrush with the slow determination of a creature that's seen a few things and decided not to rush. Giant armadillos dig through the soil. Anteaters vacuum up ants with their long, sticky tongues, and agoutis scamper about like forest squirrels with excellent manners. One of the more surprising things about Amazonian biodiversity is how much of it remains undiscovered. Scientists estimate that a large portion of the species living here, possibly more than half, haven't even been officially described yet. New frogs, fish, insects, and even birds are still being found regularly. It's a reminder that for all our knowledge, this rainforest continues to keep secrets. Some are tucked high in the canopy, others hidden in remote valleys or beneath the leaf litter. The forest is full of stories we haven't heard yet. There's a reason why ecologists and biologists flock to the Amazon with notebooks, cameras, and a mix of excitement and mosquito repellent. It's a living archive of evolutionary experiments, a place where natural selection has played out in every direction over millions of years, resulting in a level of diversity that is, frankly, almost ridiculous, but in the best possible way. If nature had a greatest hits album, the Amazon would be a double-disc edition with bonus tracks and hidden gems. It's not just a collection of species, it's a living, breathing celebration of adaptation, survival, and endless innovation. Every tree, frog, beetle, and bird is a small miracle of evolution, playing its part in a biological symphony that never quite repeats itself. And somehow, in all this noise, the rainforest finds a way to stay balanced, vibrant, and quietly magnificent. High above the forest floor, where the sunlight filters in golden ribbons and the air grows thinner and sweeter, there exists an entirely different world. This is the canopy, and it is anything but quiet. It's a treetop city buzzing with life, where leaves are highways, vines are bridges, and branches become the stage for a daily drama of survival, flirtation, and the occasional monkey shouting match. The Amazon's canopy layer stretches some 30 to 45 meters above the ground, and it's more than just a leafy roof. It's a self-contained ecosystem packed with species that may never touch the earth their entire lives. This elevated world is where much of the rainforest's action happens. It's where plants race for sunlight, birds show off their feathers, monkeys perform aerial acrobatics, and insects run entire civilizations on bark and branch. One of the most prominent residents of this leafy metropolis is the monkey. With over 100 species of primates in the Amazon, many have taken up residence in the treetops, adapting to a lifestyle that would give a human vertigo in seconds. Take the howler monkey, for example. You don't usually see them first, you hear them. Their deep guttural calls carry through the forest at dawn and dusk like echoes from a prehistoric horn. They're not shouting out of rage or excitement, It's all about territory. The louder and longer they call, the more they can avoid awkward face-to-face disputes with their neighbours. It's a little like yelling "dibs" across a densely wooded cul-de-sac. Howler monkeys are equipped with an enlarged hyoid bone in their throat, which acts like a built-in echo chamber. This anatomical quirk allows them to make sounds that can travel for more than 3 kilometers through dense forest. Not bad for an animal that spends most of its life lounging in trees and munching on leaves. Then there are the squirrel monkeys, tiny bundles of energy with expressive faces and boundless curiosity. They travel in large troops that can number up to 500 individuals, leaping from tree to tree with the grace of tightrope walkers and the enthusiasm of kindergartners on a sugar high. These monkeys are omnivorous, nibbling on fruit, insects, flowers, and the occasional lizard if it's having a particularly adventurous day. Socially, they're fascinating, highly communicative, constantly grooming one another and operating in what might best be described as organized chaos. Capuchin monkeys, meanwhile, are the clever tool users of the canopy. Observed using rocks to crack nuts and sticks to fish out insects, they've earned a reputation as the problem solvers of the monkey world. If the canopy had a science fair, capuchins would be the ones submitting homemade tools and charming the judges. Their intelligence comes with an inquisitive streak that sometimes gets them into trouble, such as stealing from other animals or knocking over the occasional researcher's camera. But monkeys don't own the canopy. They're just one part of a crowded neighborhood. Birds are the real royalty here, flitting through the treetops in bursts of color and song. The Amazon is home to more bird species than any other ecosystem on Earth, and a huge number of them live at least part of their lives in the canopy. Parrots, for instance, aren't just pretty faces with colorful feathers. They're social, intelligent, and often extremely loud, with calls that range from melodic whistles to full-throated screeches. Macaws, the showstoppers of the parrot world, can live up to 60 years in the wild and form lifelong pair bonds. They're also known to chew on clay riverbanks to neutralize toxins from their diet, a kind of jungle version of antacid tablets. Then there's the toucan, with its impossibly oversized bill that looks like it was borrowed from a cartoon. Despite appearances, the bill is surprisingly light, made of a honeycomb-like structure that's strong but not too heavy. Toucans use these bills to reach fruit, intimidate rivals, and occasionally cool themselves down. The large surface area allows heat to dissipate, making the bill a sort of biological radiator. Nature, as it turns out, is quite good at multitasking. Hummingbirds are another canopy marvel. These tiny birds beat their wings up to 80 times per second and can hover in place like miniature helicopters. Their metabolism is so fast that they have to eat almost constantly, sipping nectar from flowers and snacking on insects when they're feeling protein deficient. Some are territorial, chasing off intruders with the same tenacity you might expect from a dog guarding its favorite toy. Despite their size, they're astonishingly fierce. The canopy is also a domain of insects, billions of them in fact. Ants run vast colonies along branches, defending territories, harvesting food, and even herding aphids for honeydew, like tiny leaf-loving farmers. Some ant species are known to farm fungi inside hollow trees, carefully feeding them chewed-up leaves. In return, the fungi provide food for the colony. It's agriculture in miniature, with a touch of military precision. Leafcutter ants, in particular, are some of the most impressive engineers in the insect world. They can strip a small tree of its leaves overnight, all to feed their fungal farms hidden underground. Among the more mysterious inhabitants of the canopy are the sloths. These slow-moving, tree-dwelling mammals spend most of their lives hanging upside down. Their unhurried pace is not due to laziness but efficiency. Moving slowly makes them less noticeable to predators, and their low-energy diet of leaves doesn't support a high-speed lifestyle anyway. Their fur even hosts symbiotic algae, which helps camouflage them in the green-drenched world of the canopy. Occasionally, they descend to the forest floor to relieve themselves, a process that's as vulnerable as it is deliberate. It's risky business when your main defense is slowness, and looking vaguely like a moss-covered pillow. Reptiles also make appearances here. Trebos and vine snakes wind their way through the branches with deliberate grace, hunting birds, frogs, and sometimes rodents. They're perfectly adapted to a life spent off the ground, with prehensile tails and scales that give them traction on bark. These snakes are masters of stealth, often overlooked entirely by anyone not paying close attention. And then there are the plants, the quiet giants and cunning climbers that make the canopy possible in the first place. Epiphytes like bromeliads and orchids attach themselves to the branches of trees, drawing moisture and nutrients from the air and rain rather than soil. Some bromeliads create tiny pools in their leaf bases, which become miniature ecosystems in their own right, home to insects, frogs, and even small snakes. These water-filled tanks can support entire food chains just a few meters off the ground. Vines and lianas use the canopy in a more ambitious way, launching from the forest floor and spiraling upward in search of light. They don't invest energy in growing thick trunks. Instead, they wrap themselves around host trees, hitching a ride upward. Once they reach the canopy, they spread horizontally, sometimes forming thick tangles that create bridges between trees. This interconnected network allows animals to move from tree to tree without descending to the ground, offering both safety and mobility. The canopy is more than just a convenient home for all these creatures. It's a dynamic, sun-soaked, ever-changing space where life is constantly negotiating for space, light, and food. Every square meter is used, every niche exploited. Even fallen leaves don't go to waste. They collect in branch forks and create pockets of nutrient-rich soil, where opportunistic seeds might sprout and try their luck. What makes the canopy especially fascinating is how much we still don't know about it. For decades, scientists had limited access to this upper realm. It wasn't until the development of canopy walkways, rope systems, and tall cranes that researchers could truly explore this level of the forest. And what they've found has been astonishing. New species, unseen behaviors, and ecological interactions that were previously only guessed at. The canopy holds secrets, quiet ones that flutter on the breeze or scurry just out of sight. It's easy to think of a forest as something that grows out of the ground, but in the Amazon, life grows in every direction. The canopy isn't just up. It's outward, across, and sometimes down again in looping vines and trailing roots. It's a place of freedom and constraint, of brilliant sunlight and dappled shade, of soaring flight and cautious climbing. If the rainforest has a heart, it might beat down below in the nutrient cycles and the roots, but its soul? That could very well be found high above, in the rustle of leaves, the chatter of monkeys, and the quiet flutter of wings against a backdrop of endless green. The canopy is where the Amazon truly stretches out, sun-kissed and brimming with life, just out of reach and entirely unforgettable. As the sun slips lower in the sky and the dappled light fades from the canopy, a hush begins to settle over the Amazon. But it's not the kind of hush you'd find in a sleepy village at dusk. It's a different sort of quiet, the kind that hums with anticipation. As the daylight creatures wind down their routines, a whole new cast of characters begins to stir. This is the shift change. The jungle doesn't go to sleep. It simply changes its rhythm. The night in the Amazon is far from silent. In fact, it may be even louder than the day. But the sounds are different. Less of the chirping birds and chattering monkeys, and more of the deep, resonant croaks, shrill insect trills, and the occasional mystery rustle that could be a leaf or something with fangs. The forest becomes a symphony of shadows and sounds, and the animals that thrive here have turned the darkness into a hunting ground, a hiding place, and a stage for nocturnal drama. Start with the frogs. When the light dims and the humidity rises, frogs go into full performance mode. The Amazon is home to more species of frogs than any other place on Earth, and many of them are nocturnal. Their calls fill the night with an astonishing variety of sounds: clicks, whistles, chirps, and trills. Each species has its own unique voice, a sort of amphibian dating profile broadcast into the thick air. Some frogs are no bigger than your thumbnail, but can produce a call that travels dozens of meters. Others rely more on stealth, blending in with leaves or hiding in bromeliads filled with rainwater, quietly waiting for a meal to drift by. One of the more famous nighttime performers is the glass frog. As the name suggests, parts of its body are translucent. You can actually see its internal organs through its skin. This little marvel spends much of the night calling from leaves overhanging streams, hoping to attract a mate. Its delicate, almost ethereal appearance contrasts sharply with its loud, repetitive call, which could easily be mistaken for a digital beeping sound. It's a reminder that the rainforest often surprises by packing big voices into small packages. Insects rule the night as well. While you might encounter a few during the day, the real insect action ramps up once darkness falls. Moths take to the air in staggering numbers, some with wingspans the size of a human hand. Their patterns and colours can be subtle or spectacular, depending on their approach to survival, blending in to avoid detection or standing out to confuse predators. Fireflies flicker like living stars, their soft glow pulsing in patterns that are part communication and part romance. Different species have distinct light signatures, and some even flash in synchrony, a phenomenon that's both scientifically fascinating and oddly soothing. Crickets, cicadas, and katydids create a wall of sound that serves as both music and messaging system. The chorus can be hypnotic, so rhythmic and persistent that it seems to blur into the background until you stop and really listen. That incessant whir isn't just for show, it's an open invitation to potential mates and a bold declaration of territory. Not bad for creatures the size of a paperclip. The night also belongs to the hunters. Owls begin their patrols gliding silently through the trees with wings designed for stealth. Their feathers are shaped in such a way that air flows over them without a whisper. Many Amazonian owl species are masters of concealment, blending in with tree bark during the day and becoming ghostly shadows at night. With eyes adapted for low light and ears so sensitive they can hear a beetle crawling under leaves, they're among the most efficient predators in the forest. Another of the nocturnal elite is the kinkajou, a small arboreal mammal that looks a bit like a cross between a monkey and a teddy bear. Despite its cuddly appearance, the kinkajou is a nimble, agile creature, perfectly adapted to life in the dark treetops. It uses its long, prehensile tail for balance and its extra-long tongue, sometimes up to 13 centimeters, for scooping out fruit, nectar, and the occasional unsuspecting insect. Unlike many of its neighbors, the kinkajou is more interested in sweets than meat. It's sometimes called the honey bear, though it's neither a bear nor particularly interested in hibernation. Why nap when you've got a rainforest to explore? Among the more unexpected night dwellers are the night monkeys, also known as owl monkeys or durucules. These are the only truly nocturnal monkeys in the New World. With oversized eyes adapted for seeing in low light, they navigate the forest with a quiet confidence, moving between branches in search of fruit, leaves, and the occasional insect. They're mostly monogamous and highly social, often spotted in small family groups cuddling together in tree hollows. There's something oddly cozy about them, like little lantern-eyed night watchers keeping tabs on the forest while everyone else sleeps. But not everything moving through the night is cute or cozy. Some of it slithers. The Amazon is home to an impressive number of snakes, and quite a few of them are nocturnal. Trebos, for example, are ambush predators that lie coiled on branches, waiting for an unlucky bird, lizard, or small mammal to pass within striking range. They sense their prey using heat-sensitive pits near their mouths, which act like infrared sensors. It's a terrifyingly efficient system. Imagine being able to detect the body heat of your next meal without even seeing it. Not to be outdone, the spiders and scorpions make their presence known as well. Many Amazonian spiders are nocturnal, and their eyes gleam in the beam of a flashlight like tiny reflective jewels. Some are web builders, patiently waiting for insects to bumble into their traps. Others are hunters, roaming the forest floor or climbing into the understory in search of prey. The Brazilian wandering spider, in particular, is known for its active nighttime patrols. Despite its reputation, it prefers to be left alone and will only bite if seriously provoked. It just happens to look intimidating while minding its business. And then there's the ever-enigmatic jaguar, the apex predator of the Amazon. Though active during the day in some regions, jaguars are primarily nocturnal hunters. Their night vision is superb and their method of hunting is stealthy, patient, and powerful. Unlike many big cats that go for the neck, jaguars often kill by delivering a single bite to the skull, using their incredibly strong jaws to pierce the brain directly. It's an efficient technique, and one that underscores their position at the top of the food chain. Yet despite their power, they are rarely seen. Jaguars are masters of vanishing. You may walk within meters of one and never know it. Even the rivers take on a different personality at night. The inky black water hides caimans, which rise to the surface with eyes glowing in the dark like twin rubies. Bats skim the water in search of insects, fish leap in startled flashes, and river dolphins navigate the flooded forests using sonar clicks that echo through the liquid corridors. The aquatic world hums with energy, hidden from view but never truly quiet. What makes the Amazon's night so captivating is not just the abundance of life, but the feeling that the forest is playing by a completely different set of rules. Sight becomes less important than sound and scent. Bright colours give way to camouflage. Conversations are whispered, clicked and croaked instead of chirped or sung. It's a sensory shift, subtle, immersive and wonderfully strange. For researchers, the night presents both challenges and opportunities. Studying nocturnal species requires different tools, different instincts. A flashlight beam can be enough to dazzle a frog or alert a predator. Silence becomes essential. Patience is not optional. But for those willing to embrace the darkness, the rewards are immense. The Amazon at night is a treasure chest of evolutionary quirks and natural wonders, revealed only to those who take the time to listen. When the sun finally begins to rise again, casting golden light through the misty branches, the night shift begins to retire. Frogs quiet down, owls find their roosts, and the jungle's day dwellers start to stretch and stir. The forest doesn't sleep, it simply moves between chapters, and in the Amazon, the chapter called Night is one of the most beautifully bizarre of them all. In the great cast of Amazonian characters, there is one animal that doesn't need to shout, flash bright colours, or swing dramatically through trees to be noticed. It simply needs to exist. Quiet, powerful, and almost mythic in its presence, the jaguar is the rainforest's resident apex predator, a creature so finely tuned for its environment that it seems less like an animal and more like an ancient guardian. The jaguar, known scientifically as Panthera onca, is the largest cat in the Americas and the third largest big cat in the world, after tigers and lions. A fully grown male can weigh up to 100 kilograms, with some particularly hefty individuals tipping the scales even higher. But despite its size, the jaguar moves through the forest like a whisper. It doesn't rely on speed to catch its prey. It relies on timing, strength, and a knack for disappearing into the dappled shadows just long enough to strike. Unlike cheetahs or wolves that chase their prey over long distances, the jaguar is a classic ambush predator. It waits, still as stone, often near a trail or watering hole, and then it pounces with terrifying precision. One of the jaguar's most impressive features is its bite. Pound for pound, it has the most powerful bite of any big cat. Its jaws can crack turtle shells and crush the skulls of capybaras, its preferred method of dispatch. Where a lion might go for the neck, the jaguar often aims straight for the head, delivering a single, decisive bite that ends the hunt almost instantly. This hunting style allows jaguars to take on a wide variety of prey. In fact, they have one of the most diverse diets of any large predator. From deer, tapirs and peccaries to birds, monkeys, armadillos, and even caimans, jaguars are opportunistic and adaptable. They've even been known to fish, dipping their massive paws into rivers and swiping out unsuspecting catfish with a casual elegance that most anglers would envy. Their comfort around water sets them apart from many other big cats. While most felines tend to avoid a swim, jaguars embrace it. Rivers, creeks, and flooded forests are not obstacles but hunting grounds. Their name reflects this power and prowess. The word jaguar comes from the indigenous Tupi-Guarani word jaguarete, which roughly translates to he who kills with one leap. It's not an exaggeration. Jaguars can leap several meters through dense undergrowth, landing on their prey with the force of a battering ram in a fur coat. Their short, stocky build gives them explosive strength, while their rosette-patterned coats blend perfectly with a play of light and shadow among leaves and branches. It's as if the forest itself designed them to be invisible. Despite their formidable reputation, jaguars are elusive. They are rarely seen by people, not because they are scarce, though their numbers are declining, but because they are masters of stealth. A jaguar could be a few meters away and you'd never know. They move quietly, prefer to hunt at dawn and dusk, and have large territories that they patrol carefully. Male jaguars may roam over an area of 100 square kilometers or more, overlapping with the smaller ranges of several females. They mark their territory with scent and scratches on trees, leaving subtle signs for others to read, like an ongoing message board for big cats. Though solitary by nature, jaguars are not antisocial. They communicate through roars, growls, and chuffs, a soft, breathy vocalization that sounds a bit like an affectionate sneeze. Mating pairs will stay together briefly, and mothers are devoted to their cubs, raising them alone and teaching them the ways of the forest until they're ready to go off on their own. Cubs typically stay with their mothers for about 2 years, during which time they learn to hunt, stalk, swim, and stay alive in a world where even the top predator must tread carefully. But even the most skilled predator is not immune to danger. Jaguars face growing threats from habitat loss, deforestation, and human conflict. As roads, farms, and settlements expand into their territory, jaguars are pushed into smaller and more fragmented patches of forest. This isolation makes it harder for them to find mates and maintain healthy genetic diversity. In some areas, they are hunted, either out of fear for their pelts or in retaliation for preying on livestock. Though they are protected in many parts of their range, enforcement is inconsistent, and old myths about jaguars attacking people linger stubbornly. In reality, jaguar attacks on humans are exceedingly rare. These cats would much rather avoid people altogether. They are not interested in conflict. What they need is space, quiet, connected corridors of forest where they can hunt, roam, and carry on doing what jaguars have done for thousands of years, keeping the ecosystem in balance. A healthy jaguar population is a sign of a healthy forest. As apex predators, they regulate populations of herbivores and smaller carnivores, maintaining a natural equilibrium. Without jaguars, prey species can grow unchecked, overgrazing vegetation and disrupting the complex web of life that supports the rainforest. It's often said that the presence of a jaguar means the ecosystem is working. It means the rivers are flowing, the trees are standing, the prey is plentiful, and the forest is intact enough to support such a wide-ranging, powerful animal. Conservationists have been working to ensure the survival of these cats, focusing not just on protecting individual animals, but on preserving the landscapes they need. Initiatives like the Jaguar Corridor, a network of protected areas and ecological pathways that stretch from Mexico to Argentina, aim to keep populations connected across their range. Radio collar tracking, camera traps, and even environmental DNA sampling are helping scientists better understand jaguar behavior and movement, offering insights that can inform future efforts. The jaguar is not just a predator, it's a symbol. In indigenous cultures throughout the Amazon, jaguars hold deep spiritual significance. They're often seen as guardians, shapeshifters, or messengers between worlds. Some legends describe jaguars as beings that can move between the human and animal realms, or as ancestral spirits watching over the forest. Even today, many local communities speak of them with a mix of reverence and respect. Seeing a jaguar in the wild is considered a rare and profound experience, one that few people ever have, but even unseen, their presence is felt. A scratch on a tree, a paw print in the mud, a rustle in the undergrowth at dusk. These signs remind those who travel the forest that they are not alone, that something powerful is watching, quietly maintaining the order of things. To understand the Amazon is to understand the role of the jaguar, not just as a hunter, but as a keystone species, a cultural icon, and a barometer of the forest's health. Their continued survival is linked to the survival of countless other species, including ultimately ourselves. In a world that often celebrates noise, speed, and visibility, the jaguar is a reminder that power can be quiet, that beauty can be hidden, and that the most important players in a system aren't always the ones in the spotlight. Sometimes they are the ones watching from the shadows, patient, precise, and perfectly adapted to a world that still holds its secrets close. In the Amazon, survival is a full-time job. There's no such thing as being too clever, too colourful, or too cautious. Every creature, from the tiniest leaf-mimicking insect to the stealthiest predator, is locked into an endless game of evolution, a dynamic dance of adaptation and counter-adaptation, where the rules change constantly, and everyone is trying to outwit someone else. This ongoing arms race between hunter and hunted, parasite and host, plant and consumer, has created one of the most complex and creative ecosystems on Earth. One of the most common strategies for staying alive in the rainforest is to go unseen. Camouflage in the Amazon isn't just a cool trick. It's often the difference between life and death. Many insects have taken this to extremes. There are stick insects so convincing that even trained scientists have to do a double take to realize they're looking at an animal and not a twig. Some species can even sway gently in the breeze to mimic the movement of a branch, just in case their stillness wasn't deceptive enough. Mimicry is another favorite strategy. Butterflies, for example, are particularly fond of playing dress-up. Some species mimic the bright warning colors of toxic butterflies to trick predators into thinking they're dangerous when they're actually perfectly edible. Others mimic their surroundings so well that they vanish when they land on bark or leaves. One particularly dramatic example is the owl butterfly, whose wings are adorned with enormous eye spots. These aren't just for show. They resemble the eyes of a much larger animal, and when flashed at the right moment, they can startle a bird or lizard just long enough for the butterfly to make a clean getaway. But not everyone wants to stay hidden. Some creatures prefer to be as loud and proud as possible. This strategy, known as aposematism, involves advertising your unpleasantness to the world. Poisoned dart frogs, for instance, wear their toxicity like a badge of honor. Their skin is often neon blue, yellow, or red, a vivid warning sign to any predator thinking about making a snack out of them. And it's not an empty threat. These frogs secrete potent alkaloid toxins through their skin, some of which can cause paralysis or even death in small doses. The brighter the frog, the more dangerous it tends to be, a rare case where fashion and function are perfectly aligned. Interestingly, not all poisonous animals produce their own toxins. Many, like the dart frogs, acquire them through their diet, often by eating toxic ants or other arthropods. Remove the source, and the frog's toxicity fades over time. This means that captive-bred dart frogs, raised on a more bland diet, are usually not dangerous at all. It's like being scary as a full-time job that requires the right groceries. On the other side of the spectrum, predators have their own bag of tricks. Many are ambush specialists relying on stealth and timing rather than speed. The Amazon snakes are experts in this art form. Take the eyelash viper, for example, a small, beautifully patterned snake that blends perfectly into flowers and foliage. It waits patiently for a bird or small mammal to come within striking distance, then lashes out with blinding speed. Its venom acts quickly, immobilizing prey before it can flee or cry out. Spiders use both venom and architecture. The golden orb weaver spins massive, shimmering webs across open gaps in the forest, often high up in the canopy. Their silk is incredibly strong, capable of capturing insects and even small birds. The spider waits off to the side, sensing vibrations through the strands, and then moves in with calculated precision. Other spiders take a more active approach, stalking prey across leaves and branches with quiet determination. Some species even mimic ants to sneak past predators or infiltrate colonies. Predators in the Amazon must also be excellent problem solvers. Harpy eagles, among the largest raptors in the world, hunt from above with astonishing focus. Their talons are as big as grizzly bear claws, and they can lift prey nearly their own weight. Their favorite meals include sloths and monkeys, both of which think they're safely hidden in the trees, until a silent swoop proves otherwise. Harpy eagles rely on exceptional vision and muscle power, but also on understanding patterns. They watch, they wait, and they strike only when the odds are in their favor. For many animals, it's not just about fighting or fleeing. It's about finding a clever workaround. Some ants, for instance, have formed mutualistic relationships with trees. The tree provides shelter in the form of hollow thorns or specialized chambers, and the ants patrol its leaves, attacking herbivores and even trimming away invasive vines. It's a protection racket that benefits both parties. Other ants farm fungus, cutting and carrying leaves back to underground chambers where the vegetation is fed to carefully cultivated fungal colonies. The ants don't eat the leaves, they eat the fungus that grows on them. It's agriculture on a miniature scale, complete with pest control, waste management and fungal breeding. Plants too are far from passive players in this evolutionary theatre. Many have evolved defences like thorns, toxins or tough leaves to deter herbivores. Some produce chemicals that mimic insect pheromones, attracting pollinators or luring prey. There are plants that trap insects in sticky surfaces, plants that close their leaves when touched, and even plants that eavesdrop on their neighbours. That's right, some species can detect chemical signals from nearby plants being eaten by insects and respond by boosting their own defences, just in case the attacker heads their way. It's the botanical equivalent of overhearing your neighbour getting robbed and immediately locking all your doors. Parasitism is another thriving lifestyle in the Amazon, though it rarely gets the same attention as flashy predators or charismatic monkeys. Parasitic wasps are perhaps the most famous of this group. These tiny creatures lay their eggs inside other insects, usually caterpillars. The larvae hatch and eat their host from the inside out, in what is perhaps nature's most unsettling version of room service. But even here, the evolutionary arms race continues. Some caterpillars have evolved tough skins or immune responses that destroy the invading eggs, while some wasps have evolved countermeasures to suppress these defenses. It's a battle being waged on a microscopic scale, invisible to the casual observer but fierce in its intensity. Symbiosis, where different species help each other out, is another important part of survival strategy. Bromeliads, which grow high in the canopy, collect rainwater in their tightly curled leaves. These miniature ponds become homes for frogs, insects, and even small crustaceans, creating self-contained ecosystems meters above the ground. Everyone benefits. The plant gets nutrients from the waste of its residents, and the residents get a safe, moist place to live. Even within the same species, cooperation can be key. Army ants, for instance, form living bridges with their own bodies to cross gaps, or create massive raiding parties that overwhelm prey with sheer numbers. They communicate with chemicals and touch, coordinating movements with such efficiency that it looks like a single, flowing organism rather than thousands of tiny individuals. There's something oddly poetic about it, like watching a murmuration of starlings, only with more mandibles. Survival in the Amazon isn't just about strength or speed, it's about adaptability. The forest is a web of relationships, mutualists, parasites, predators, prey, mimics, deceivers, and collaborators, all shaped by millions of years of evolutionary pressure. Each adaptation, whether dramatic or subtle, tells a story about the challenges of life in a place where everything is trying to eat, reproduce, or avoid becoming dinner. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to survival here. Instead, nature has experimented wildly, producing everything from bullet ants with their excruciating sting to fungi that hijack insect minds and use their bodies like marionettes. Some creatures go for stealth, others go for spectacle. Some blend in, others advertise themselves with neon flair, but all of them, in their own way, are playing the same game: stay alive, leave offspring, and pass on the genes that made it possible. It's easy to walk through a rainforest and be dazzled by the noise, the colour, the sheer volume of life on display, but look a little closer, and what you'll see is a layered living storybook of strategy, resilience, and endless invention. Every leaf, every wing, every claw and tooth is the product of an ancient and ongoing contest, one that has produced the most breathtaking diversity on Earth. Beneath the tangled green canopy and the orchestra of trilling frogs and squawking birds, something quieter is at work. It doesn't call attention to itself. It doesn't flash colours or leap between trees. But it is one of the most important forces in the Amazon. It holds the forest together, keeps the air breathable, and plays a leading role in regulating the planet's climate. It's not a creature or a predator, it's a process. And that process is photosynthesis. At its core, photosynthesis is a kind of biochemical wizardry that plants use to convert sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water into sugar and oxygen. It's deceptively simple in concept: light in, sugar out. But the impact it has on the Amazon, and on Earth as a whole, is colossal. This ancient trick, perfected billions of years ago by microscopic algae, is now performed billions of times every second across the Amazon. Every leaf you see, whether it belongs to a towering tree or a humble fern, is a tiny solar panel hard at work, pulling carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and using it to build living tissue. In the Amazon, this process is supercharged. With abundant sunlight, warm temperatures, and more than 200 rainy days a year in many areas, the forest is an ideal setting for photosynthesis to run at full throttle, and run it does. The Amazon rainforest produces roughly 1/5 of the world's oxygen during the day through photosynthesis, though it also consumes much of that oxygen at night through respiration. It's not so much a global oxygen factory as it's sometimes mythologized, but more of a great recycler, breathing in carbon and breathing out life. The scale is astonishing. A single hectare of Amazon forest, about the size of a soccer field, can contain hundreds of tree species, each with thousands of leaves. Multiply that across millions of square kilometers, and you get a living, breathing biome capable of moving vast amounts of carbon. Scientists estimate that the Amazon stores around 120 billion tons of carbon in its biomass. That's carbon that's not floating around in the atmosphere contributing to climate change. Instead, it's locked away in roots, trunks, branches, and leaves, woven into the very structure of the forest. Carbon storage in the Amazon is a balancing act. Trees absorb carbon as they grow, locking it up in their wood. When they die and decompose, much of that carbon is released back into the atmosphere, but some of it remains in the soil or is recycled into new growth. In a healthy, undisturbed forest, the intake and release of carbon are more or less in equilibrium. It's a natural rhythm, a kind of ecological accounting that's been humming along for thousands of years. The problem arises when that rhythm is disrupted. When trees are cut down or burned, the carbon stored in their trunks and branches is suddenly released. Deforestation doesn't just remove the forest's ability to absorb future carbon. It actively reverses the process, turning a carbon sink into a carbon source. And in a world already grappling with rising atmospheric carbon levels, that shift is significant. It's like melting your ice cubes while trying to cool your drink. The system begins working against you. What makes the Amazon particularly important in the global carbon cycle is not just the quantity of carbon it stores, but how active the process is. It's a dynamic forest, constantly growing, shedding leaves, cycling nutrients, and interacting with the atmosphere. The Amazon's productivity, the rate at which it creates new plant material through photosynthesis, is among the highest on Earth. Every hour, the forest transforms sunlight into energy with the quiet precision of 1 billion green machines. At the cellular level, photosynthesis involves chlorophyll, the green pigment that gives plants their color. Chlorophyll absorbs light, mostly in the blue and red wavelengths, and uses that energy to split water molecules into hydrogen and oxygen. The hydrogen is combined with carbon dioxide to make sugars, and the oxygen is released as a byproduct. It's a remarkably elegant system, and one that's remained essentially unchanged for hundreds of millions of years. Nature nailed it early and never looked back. Interestingly, not all parts of the Amazon contribute equally to this process. The upper canopy, where leaves receive the most direct sunlight, is the photosynthetic powerhouse, but even the shaded understory plays a role, using what light filters through to continue the process at a slower pace. Some plants have evolved to be extremely efficient at capturing limited light, with large, thin leaves designed to catch every possible photon. Others grow upward with astonishing speed, racing to reach the light before their neighbors do. It's a green competition, fast, silent, and relentless. Photosynthesis also has a direct effect on the rainforest's water cycle. As plants absorb water through their roots and lose it through transpiration, That moisture contributes to the formation of clouds and rain. In this way, photosynthesis doesn't just drive the carbon cycle, it helps sustain the forest's own weather. It's part of a beautifully interconnected system where light, water and carbon are constantly being exchanged, reused and transformed. The role of the Amazon in carbon sequestration has become a major focus for climate scientists. Some models suggest that intact tropical forests like the Amazon may help slow climate change by continuing to absorb large amounts of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. But there's a catch. As global temperatures rise and weather patterns shift, the balance could tip. Increased droughts, higher temperatures, and ongoing deforestation can reduce the forest's ability to take in carbon and increase the chances of fires, tree mortality, and ecosystem collapse. A tipping point once crossed may be difficult to reverse. Yet despite these looming threats, the forest continues its quiet labor. Each leaf, each blade of grass, each mossy fern tucked in the crook of a tree is a small engine for stability. The Amazon doesn't ask for attention. It simply gets on with the job. And it's not just the trees doing the work. Lianas, shrubs, ground cover, aquatic plants along riverbanks all contribute to the carbon puzzle. Even the algae that grow on submerged roots and rocks are helping to shape the climate, one molecule at a time. Photosynthesis in the Amazon isn't just a natural process. It's a form of planetary stewardship. It's the forest doing what it does best: growing, cycling, breathing. For all the complexity of climate science, there is something profoundly comforting about this process. It's reliable, predictable, ancient. In a world full of shifting uncertainties, the Amazon's photosynthetic pulse continues to beat with quiet consistency. Provided we don't get in its way. Understanding this process helps us appreciate what's at stake. When we talk about protecting the rainforest, we're not just saving trees or animals. We're preserving a system that stabilizes the global climate, feeds the clouds, and sustains life as we know it. The Amazon is more than just a forest. It's a vast biological machine, one that transforms sunlight into life and locks carbon into wood with the elegance of a natural masterpiece. In many ways, every breath we take is connected to photosynthesis, and much of that connection winds back to places like the Amazon, where leaves flutter under a golden sky, quietly doing the work of the world. It's not flashy, it's not loud, but it might just be the most important process on the planet, and it all begins with light, water, and a touch of green magic. The Amazon might look like a sea of leaves and branches from above, but if you could zoom in, not just with your eyes, but with a microscope and a generous imagination, you'd discover something truly remarkable. The forest is whispering. Not in words, of course, but through chemistry, through electrical pulses, root signals, fungal networks, and airborne compounds that drift on breezes like fragrant telegrams. Trees and plants are not just standing around looking leafy, they're communicating. This idea might sound like science fiction, but it's grounded in real science. Over the last few decades, researchers have uncovered an astonishing world beneath the forest floor, one where trees are connected quite literally by a living web of fungi. This underground system, often called the mycorrhizal network, or more whimsically, the Wood Wide Web, allows plants to share information, nutrients, and even warnings. It turns out that forests, far from being collections of isolated individuals, are deeply interconnected communities. Let's start with the basics. Most plants in the Amazon form partnerships with mycorrhizal fungi. These fungi attach themselves to plant roots and extend far into the soil, creating long thread-like structures called hyphae. These filaments are thinner than a human hair, but can stretch for meters through the soil, linking one tree's root system to another's. In exchange for sugars provided by the plant, the fungi help absorb water and nutrients, especially phosphorus and nitrogen, from parts of the soil the roots can't easily reach. This arrangement is a classic example of symbiosis. The tree feeds the fungi, and the fungi help the tree grow. But the relationship doesn't stop there. Because the hyphae connect multiple plants, the fungi also act as communication conduits. If one tree is attacked by insects, for instance, it can release chemical signals through its roots. These signals travel through the fungal network and alert neighboring trees, which may then start ramping up their own chemical defenses, producing bitter-tasting compounds in their leaves, for example, to make themselves less appetizing. It's not quite a rainforest group chat, but it's close. What's especially fascinating is that this communication can occur between different species of plants. A mahogany tree can, in theory, warn a nearby fig tree that something unpleasant is nibbling its bark. The network doesn't seem to care much about species lines. It simply carries information from one node to another. The implications are staggering. Forests are not just passive backdrops for animal life. They're responsive, reactive, and in many ways cooperative. But it's not all neighborly kindness and mutual alerts. Sometimes the signals are competitive. Plants may also use these networks to release allelopathic chemicals, compounds that inhibit the growth of nearby rivals. In other words, trees can sabotage their competition. It's less kumbaya and more strategic alliance, like a forest version of international diplomacy, where cooperation and conflict go hand in hand depending on the circumstances. Above ground, the Amazon is also buzzing with chemical messages. When trees are attacked by herbivores, say, a swarm of caterpillars, they don't just silently endure it. Some release volatile organic compounds, VOCs, into the air. These chemicals drift on the wind and can trigger nearby plants to activate their own defense mechanisms. It's a bit like a plant sounding the alarm. Some VOCs even attract predators or parasites that feed on the herbivores, enlisting an army of insect allies to help fight back. Take acacia trees, for example. When grazed by herbivores, they release ethylene into the air. Other acacia trees downwind detect this signal and start pumping toxins into their leaves preemptively. The giraffes of Africa have learned to graze upwind for this very reason. Though the Amazon's version of this story involves a different cast of players, the principle remains the same. Plants can eavesdrop, prepare, and even retaliate. And then there's the matter of scent. The Amazon is filled with fragrances, some sweet, some musky, some so faint you'd need the nose of a jaguar to notice. Many of these scents are not just pleasant byproducts, they are signals. Flowers use scent to attract pollinators. Fruits emit odors to entice animals to eat them and disperse the seeds. Some plants even release stress signals when injured, letting nearby creatures know that something traumatic just happened, whether it's a broken stem or a hungry beetle with a taste for chlorophyll. These chemical exchanges are not limited to emergencies. Some plants synchronize flowering or fruiting through environmental cues, and possibly even through biochemical signals. In the Amazon, you'll sometimes see mass fruiting events, where multiple tree species produce fruit all at once, often triggered by a shared environmental signal, such as a sudden change in rainfall or temperature. This overwhelming abundance of food floods the system, ensuring that enough seeds survive predation and germinate. It's cooperation through timing, and it suggests that trees might be listening to more than just the weather. But not all communication is chemical. Some is structural. Trees respond to touch. Vines like the famous Bocchilla trifoliolata can mimic the shape of the leaves they're climbing on. While not an Amazon native, it hints at the possibility that plants are capable of a kind of visual awareness, or at least a response to physical and possibly even visual cues in their environment. Some species respond to the mere shade cast by other plants, adjusting their growth direction to avoid competition and seek light elsewhere. It's easy to fall into the habit of thinking of plants as static, slow, and unresponsive. But the more we study them, the more we realize that plants are busy, constantly processing information, adapting to their surroundings, and responding to stimuli with remarkable sophistication. They don't have brains, nerves, or muscles, but they've evolved their own forms of awareness, distributed through tissues, roots, and leaves, supported by complex chemical pathways. In the Amazon, this complexity is taken to new heights. With thousands of plant species packed into a single square kilometer, the possibilities for interaction are nearly infinite. Some species have likely co-evolved for millions of years, developing finely tuned relationships that only make sense within this specific ecosystem. Orchids that rely on one particular moth for pollination. Trees whose seeds will only germinate after passing through the digestive tract of a certain monkey. Leaves that time their fall with the rise of fungi that specialize in decomposing them. And all the while, beneath the roots, the fungal networks continue to grow. A single teaspoon of Amazonian soil can contain kilometers of fungal hyphae, an astonishing density of life, invisible to the naked eye but essential to everything above. These networks don't just connect plants, they shape the forest's entire structure. They influence which plants thrive, how nutrients are distributed, and how the forest responds to stress and change. There's even evidence that older, larger trees, sometimes called mother trees, act as central hubs in the underground network. They may provide extra resources to their own seedlings or to struggling neighbors, supporting the regeneration of the forest. It's a reminder that trees are not just individuals, they're part of a larger whole, both physically and ecologically. A forest is not a crowd, it's a community. This interconnectedness challenges the way we think about nature. It suggests that intelligence doesn't always look like neurons and brains. Sometimes it looks like a slow chemical conversation, or a shift in leaf shape, or a network of roots and fungi responding in real time to subtle changes in the soil. It's a different kind of intelligence, distributed, decentralized, and deeply patient. In the end, the idea that trees talk isn't just poetic, it's scientifically accurate, albeit in a complex and chemical sort of way. And in the Amazon, where the density of life is unmatched, that conversation is constant. Every tree, every fungus, every leaf and root is part of an enormous ongoing dialogue, one that has shaped the forest for millennia and continues to shape it today. It's not loud, it's not in words, but it is rich, intricate, and very real. The forest listens, it remembers, and it responds. If the Amazon rainforest had a soundtrack, it would be composed almost entirely of whispers, not from people, or even necessarily from animals, but from the trees themselves, from their leaves, their trunks, and the way they interact with the air. That sound, subtle as it may be, is more than background noise. It's evidence of something extraordinary, a rainforest that helps make its own weather. The Amazon doesn't just sit around waiting for rain to fall, it plays an active role in generating the very rainfall it relies on. This grand hydrological loop is part magic and part science, a process so intricate that it stretches across thousands of kilometers, yet relies on the behavior of individual leaves. It all begins with one of the rainforest's most overlooked superpowers, transpiration. During the day, trees draw water up through their roots and into their leaves. Once there, that water doesn't just stay put, it evaporates through tiny pores called stomata, drifting into the air as water vapor. This process, called transpiration, is essentially tree breathing. When you scale that up to account for the more than 390 billion trees in the Amazon, you're looking at an immense volume of moisture being pumped into the atmosphere, nearly 20 billion tons every single day. That vapor rises into the air and begins to condense into clouds. These aren't your average cumulus clouds floating lazily above a meadow. These are thick, dark thunder clouds with serious intentions. By early afternoon, the buildup of moisture and heat becomes unstable. The sky starts to boil, and then, as if on cue, the heavens open. Rain pours down in torrents, soaking the forest and recharging the cycle all over again. This self-sustaining weather machine is what scientists call a biotic pump. In essence, the rainforest pulls moisture inland from the Atlantic Ocean, then recycles and redistributes it through a cycle of evaporation, transpiration, condensation, and precipitation. And the entire mechanism is powered by sunlight and leaf chemistry. It's one of nature's most elegant systems, an ecosystem engineering its own climate from the inside out. What makes the Amazon's hydrological cycle even more fascinating is how far-reaching its effects are. The rain that falls in São Paulo, the crops growing in Argentina, and even some of the weather patterns in the southern United States are influenced by this moisture pump. The water vapor produced in the Amazon doesn't just fall back down locally. Much of it is carried away by prevailing winds in vast atmospheric rivers, long, narrow corridors of concentrated moisture that stream through the sky like invisible highways. These flying rivers can extend thousands of kilometers and carry more water than the Amazon River itself. They're essential not just to the rainforest but to the stability of surrounding regions. Agricultural zones far outside the forest's borders depend on the Amazon's moisture. That coffee you enjoy in the morning? That's partially thanks to the rainforest clouds keeping coffee-growing regions hydrated. The soybeans and beef from Brazil's Central Plains, they also owe their productivity to this finely tuned rain machine. Incredibly, the Amazon's trees don't just contribute water vapor, they may also help initiate rainfall itself. Trees emit tiny particles known as aerosols into the atmosphere. These can come from pollen, fungal spores, or even organic compounds called terpenes, the same family of chemicals that gives pine trees their distinct scent. These particles act as cloud condensation nuclei. In simpler terms, they give water vapor something to cling to. Without them, water molecules struggle to clump together into droplets. With them, clouds form faster and denser, boosting the chances of rainfall. So in a strange twist, the forest is not only fueling its own rainstorms with moisture, it's seeding the clouds with the materials they need to form. Think of it as throwing a party where you bring not just the guests, but also the cake, the decorations, and the playlist. But the system is fragile. When large areas of forest are cleared for agriculture or infrastructure, several things happen all at once. First, there are fewer trees releasing water vapor through transpiration. That means less moisture in the atmosphere and fewer clouds forming over the region. Second, with fewer trees producing those handy aerosol particles, the efficiency of cloud formation drops. Third, open areas with exposed soil heat up more quickly than shaded forest, disrupting local air currents and creating temperature imbalances that alter the flow of atmospheric moisture. All of this leads to a reduction in rainfall, not just over the deforested areas, but potentially over regions hundreds or even thousands of kilometers away. In extreme cases, scientists worry about the possibility of triggering a feedback loop. Less forest means less rain. Less rain means more drought stress. More drought stress means more tree death and vulnerability to fire. And more fire and deforestation lead to, you guessed it, even less forest. It's like pulling threads from a sweater and watching the whole thing unravel. Except the sweater is the climate system, and there's no quick way to knit it back together. Adding to the complexity is the fact that trees are not evenly spaced nor functionally identical. Different species transpire at different rates, release different chemical compounds, and have different water storage capacities. Some trees act like giant water towers, storing moisture in their massive trunks and slowly releasing it throughout the dry season. Others respond more quickly to changing conditions, adjusting their leaf behavior to either conserve or release moisture depending on temperature, humidity, and light availability. It's a community, and each member plays a unique role in keeping the weather humming along. During drought years, such as those associated with strong El Niño events, the forest's water cycle falters. Rainfall drops, temperatures rise, and transpiration slows. This makes the forest more vulnerable to fire, both from natural causes and human activity. In a healthy rainforest, fires are rare. The undergrowth is too damp, and the humidity too high. But during a severe dry spell, even this lush biome can burn. And when it does, the consequences ripple through the atmosphere. Smoke from fires not only releases carbon, but it also changes the chemistry of the air. It can block sunlight, reduce photosynthesis, and alter the formation of clouds. It's a domino effect, where a single environmental disruption leads to a cascade of changes. Rainforests aren't just shaped by water, they shape the water itself. Even the forest structure influences rainfall. The tall trees of the canopy slow down the raindrops that fall from the sky, dispersing them gently and allowing more water to infiltrate the soil. In a cleared field, rain hits the ground harder, causing erosion and runoff. In contrast, a mature rainforest acts like a sponge. Its thick layer of organic matter soaks up rainfall and slowly releases it into the water table, sustaining rivers long after the rain has stopped. This is especially important during dry spells, when that stored moisture keeps streams and plants alive. It's this ability to capture, store, release, and regenerate moisture that makes the Amazon such a climate powerhouse. It's not just a passive receiver of weather patterns, it's an active architect of the hydrological cycle, both locally and far beyond. A forest of this size and complexity doesn't just respond to the atmosphere, it helps build it. Understanding the Amazon's role in global water dynamics isn't just about appreciating its beauty, it's about recognizing its function as a system that sustains agriculture, regulates temperature, and ensures that monsoons arrive on time. Every tree cut, every acre burned, chips away at that system. But the good news is that reforestation, conservation, and science-backed policy can help preserve and even restore these processes. And perhaps most remarkably, all of this, the flying rivers, the vapor pumps, the self-seeding clouds, relies on the quiet work of billions of leaves, each no larger than your hand, each one sweating softly under the equatorial sun, sending up a tiny puff of moisture that joins the grand chorus of mist above. Together, they write the weather, shape the sky, and keep the planet in balance. It's easy to think of rain as something that just happens, but in the Amazon, rain is a conversation between earth and sky, a call and response in vapor and cloud, and the trees, they are both the speakers and the song. In the Amazon, even the silence is noisy. That might sound like a contradiction, but spend a few moments listening closely in the heart of the rainforest, and you'll start to understand. Beneath the steady hum of insects and the occasional squawk of a parrot, there's a layered world of sound, subtle vibrations, far-off hoots, gentle rustles, and cryptic clicks that never quite resolve into anything familiar. It's not chaotic, though. It's more like an organic symphony, always in motion, each player adding a unique note to the forest's living soundscape. Sound is a vital part of life in the Amazon. For many of the creatures here, it's more than just a way to express frustration over a stolen fruit or to lure in a mate. It's the primary method of communication, navigation, defense, and even territorial negotiation. In an environment where visibility is often limited by dense vegetation, sound travels where sight cannot. It cuts through the thick air, across tree trunks and underbrush, carrying messages from one end of the forest to the other. Let's start with one of the most iconic vocalists of the Amazon, the howler monkey. If you've never heard a howler monkey before, imagine the unholy mix of a lion's roar, a hurricane in a tunnel, and a haunted foghorn. These monkeys aren't shy. Their calls can carry for over 3 kilometers, and that's no accident. Male howlers use their booming voices to stake out territory, warn off rivals, and impress potential mates, and they're equipped for the job. A specialized bone in their throat called the hyoid acts like a built-in amplifier, allowing them to project their voices with remarkable volume and resonance. The howlers aren't yelling just to hear themselves. By broadcasting their presence, they reduce the chances of physical conflict. If a rival hears a dominant male's call echoing through the trees, they may think twice before entering that patch of forest. It's a kind of acoustic fencing, and in a habitat where energy is precious and fights can be costly, this sort of long-distance diplomacy can make all the difference. But howler monkeys aren't the only vocal performers. The Amazon is filled with birds that sing, scream, whistle, and warble their way through the treetops. One standout is the screaming piha. You'd be forgiven for thinking this plain grey bird was some kind of rainforest ghost with a megaphone. Despite its nondescript appearance, its call is among the loudest of any bird on Earth. The piha's song rings out with such clarity and volume that it's often mistaken for a sound effect in documentaries. And yet spotting one is surprisingly tricky. They prefer to stay tucked away in the greenery, letting their voices do all the showing off. Another notable audio artist is the white bellbird, a stocky little creature with a voice so powerful it can cause mild discomfort to anyone standing too close. During courtship, the male bellbird sings directly into the face of the female, sometimes from just a few centimeters away. Why she doesn't immediately fly off with her feathers rattled is anyone's guess, but it seems this intense serenade works. When you're a bellbird, love is loud. And of course, we must mention the frogs. Once the sun sets, frogs take over the rainforest's vocal duties, and they are relentless. Each species has its own unique call. Some trill like old mobile phones, others chirp, click, or even quack. These calls help them find mates in the dark and noisy night. In fact, many species adjust the timing, pitch, or volume of their calls to avoid acoustic overlap with other frogs in the area. It's like an elaborate multilingual chorus where everyone waits for their turn to speak. Insects are no less enthusiastic. Katydids and crickets form a near-constant background rhythm, especially after dusk. Their stridulation, produced by rubbing their wings or legs together, is a mix of music and message. Some signals are for courtship, others for defense, and some may even help keep spacing between individuals of the same species. The result is a wall of sound that can be hypnotic, like nature's own white noise machine. It might sound random at first, but there's a structure to it. A rhythmic cadence that shifts as temperature, humidity, and the hour of night change. Perhaps the most mysterious contributors to the Amazonian soundscape are the ultrasonic and infrasonic communicators, those that vocalize outside the range of human hearing. Bats, for example, emit high-pitched ultrasonic calls for echolocation. They use these sonic pulses like biological sonar, navigating through tight spaces, avoiding obstacles, and locating tiny insects mid-flight. Each call bounces off surfaces and returns to the bat's ears, painting an auditory map of their surroundings. To us, these calls are silent. But to the bats, they're a vivid, rapid-fire language of clicks, distances, and shapes. On the opposite end of the spectrum, large animals like elephants and some birds are known to produce infrasonic calls, sounds below the range of human hearing. While this is more commonly studied in African elephants, some researchers speculate that certain Amazonian animals may also use low-frequency sounds to communicate over long distances. These rumbles could travel through the forest floor or the air, reaching potential mates or signaling danger without alerting predators. It's the jungle equivalent of sending a secret message on a subwoofer. Even the trees, though they don't produce sounds in the traditional sense, contribute to the acoustic environment. During rainstorms, water droplets hit leaves at different speeds and angles, creating a delicate percussion that varies depending on the density and structure of the foliage. Wind whistling through liana tangles or rustling palm fronds creates a kind of ambient soundtrack, and during especially hot afternoons, the forest occasionally lets out what some researchers call thermal pops, tiny snapping sounds from expanding plant tissues or drying seed pods. It's the sound of the forest reacting to the weather in real time. There's also a more recent player in the Amazonian soundscape, one that isn't natural at all. The intrusion of human noise is becoming more noticeable, particularly near settlements, roads, and rivers. Chainsaws, motors, and even distant voices alter the acoustic balance of the forest. This kind of noise pollution can have serious consequences. Studies have shown that excessive human noise can disrupt animal behavior, interfering with mating calls, masking predator warnings, and even pushing species to abandon otherwise suitable habitats. In an ecosystem where so much depends on listening and being heard, unwanted noise can become a major stressor. That's why some scientists are turning to sound to monitor the health of the rainforest. By setting up acoustic sensors in various locations, they can create long-term recordings of the Amazon soundscape. These recordings help researchers track biodiversity, detect changes in species populations, and even spot illegal activities like logging or poaching. The forest tells its story not just through its leaves and roots, but through its chorus. The more we learn about the rainforest's sonic environment, the clearer it becomes that this is not random noise. It's structured, meaningful, and essential to survival. It's the chirp of a frog announcing its availability, the warning cry of a bird spotting a snake, the soothing trill that keeps a mating pair connected in the dark. It's also the sound of evolution, millions of years of trial, error, and adaptation, compressed into songs, calls, clicks, and buzzes. To walk through the Amazon is to walk through a living language, one spoken not in words but in waves. Every sound has a sender and a receiver. Every silence means something. And if you stop and really listen, not just with your ears but with your curiosity, you'll start to hear the forest speaking. Not in sentences perhaps, but in pulses of presence, in breath and wing beat, in whistle and rustle and rhythm. In a world increasingly dominated by the artificial, there's something profoundly grounding about this great natural conversation. It reminds us that communication doesn't belong solely to humans. The rainforest talks constantly to itself, to its inhabitants, and to those willing to listen. And once you've heard its voice, even just for a moment, the silence of other places never quite feels the same again. The Amazon rainforest may be bursting at the seams with animal life, but it's the plants that provide the framework for the entire show. And while the forest might seem like an endless sea of green at first glance, beneath that leafy camouflage lies a bustling world of strategies, quirks, and feats of botanical engineering that rival anything in the animal kingdom. The trees here aren't just growing, they're scheming, they're climbing, competing, cooperating, defending, and in some cases performing feats so peculiar that they stretch the very definition of what it means to be a plant. Let's start with the architecture. Amazonian trees aren't built for show. They are precision engineered to survive in a world where space is limited, light is fiercely contested, and the soil isn't exactly the all-you-can-eat buffet you might expect from a place so full of life. In fact, one of the most surprising things about the rainforest is just how poor the soil can be. It's often acidic, nutrient-poor, and surprisingly shallow, but the forest compensates for this by recycling nutrients rapidly. Dead leaves, fallen fruit, and expired animals are broken down quickly by fungi, bacteria, and armies of insects, allowing trees to reabsorb what they need with remarkable efficiency. To support themselves in this thin soil, many trees have developed buttress roots, massive flared structures that radiate out from the trunk like natural flying buttresses on a Gothic cathedral. These roots don't dive deep. Instead, they spread wide, offering stability and anchoring the tree in the often soggy ground. Some buttresses can rise taller than a grown adult and extend outwards several meters. They're like the rainforest's version of sensible footwear. Not elegant, perhaps, but wonderfully practical. But stability isn't enough in a forest where everyone's reaching for the same thing: light. And here's where things get competitive. The tallest trees in the Amazon, called emergent trees, break through the canopy and stretch up to 50 or even 60 meters high. They tower above their neighbors, soaking up direct sunlight and casting shade below. These giants often belong to species like Ceiba pentandra, also known as the kapok tree, a titan with a straight trunk and an umbrella of branches at the top. These trees don't bother with branching out down low. They aim straight for the sky. Smaller trees and saplings, meanwhile, wait their turn. They bide their time in the understory, surviving on filtered light and growing slowly, sometimes for decades. But when an old tree falls and a gap opens up in the canopy, they explode upwards, competing with each other to fill the space. It's a bit like nature's version of musical chairs, only instead of grabbing a seat, you're grabbing a sunbeam. Then there are the opportunists, the climbers and hitchhikers. Vines, lianas, and epiphytes take advantage of the forest's vertical real estate in astonishing ways. Lianas start on the forest floor and grow upward, using other trees as scaffolding. Unlike trees, which have to invest energy in building strong self-supporting trunks, lianas save resources by piggybacking their way to the canopy. Once they reach the top, they spread laterally, often forming tangled bridges between treetops. This network allows monkeys, sloths, and even some birds to move through the forest without ever touching the ground. Epiphytes take a different route. These are the air plants, orchids, bromeliads, ferns, and mosses that live high up in the branches without ever sinking roots into the soil. They cling to trunks and branches, drawing water from rain and mist and absorbing nutrients from fallen debris. Bromeliads, for instance, are natural water tanks. Their rosette-shaped leaves trap rainwater, forming small pools that serve as homes for frogs, insects, and even small snakes. Each bromeliad becomes a mini ecosystem, supporting life meters above the ground. Even the ways that trees protect themselves are nothing short of ingenious. The rainforest may be full of sunshine and water, but it's also full of things that want to eat you. Leaves, bark, and seeds are all on someone's menu, so plants have evolved a dizzying array of defenses. Some produce toxic compounds to make themselves unpalatable. Others go for bitterness or toughness. Certain trees are so chemically defended that even insects won't touch them unless they've evolved specific adaptations to cope. Then there's the mechanical defense. Thorns and spines are common, especially among young saplings trying to survive the browsing mouths of herbivores. Some plants, like the Mimosa pudica, also known as the sensitive plant, respond to touch by folding their leaves inwards. It's a startling reaction for a plant and may deter curious grazers or shaking insects from sticking around too long. But not all plant strategies are defensive. Some are downright charming. Take, for example, the bright colors and sweet aromas of fruiting trees. These are not just nature's dessert trays, they're delivery systems. Many rainforest fruits are designed specifically to be eaten by animals. The seeds are resistant to digestion, so while the tasty part is consumed and enjoyed, the seeds pass through the animal and are deposited elsewhere, often with a bit of natural fertilizer to help them along. Monkeys, bats, toucans, and even fish contribute to this arboreal postal service, spreading seeds across vast distances. One especially clever adaptation can be found in the Brazil nut tree. These trees are enormous, often over 40 meters tall, and they produce large woody fruits that resemble cannonballs. The seeds inside are what we know as Brazil nuts, but here's the twist. The pods are so tough that very few animals can break them open. One of the few capable of this feat is the agouti, a rodent with impressively strong jaws. It gnaws through the outer shell, extracts the seeds, and sometimes buries a few for later. If it forgets about them, which rodents are occasionally known to do, those seeds may sprout into new trees. So, in a very real sense, the future of the Brazil nut tree depends on a forgetful rodent with a taste for protein. Pollination is another area where rainforest plants get creative. While many rely on the wind or generalist insects like bees, others have evolved intricate relationships with specific animals. Some orchids can only be pollinated by a single species of moth or bee. Their flowers are shaped just so, often producing scents, or even chemical mimicry to lure in the right pollinator. It's the botanical equivalent of writing a love letter in a very specific dialect and hoping only your ideal match reads it. And let's not forget the strangler fig, a plant that begins life not as a seedling on the forest floor, but high in the branches of another tree. It starts as a harmless epiphyte, sending roots downward and leaves upward, but over time it grows thicker and stronger, wrapping itself around its host. Eventually the original tree is outcompeted and dies, leaving behind a hollow column of fig roots. It's part tragedy, part marvel, a reminder that even in the world of plants, competition can be ruthless. For all their differences, what unites the plants of the Amazon is their adaptability. This forest is a living experiment in what life can do when given time, moisture, warmth, and just the right amount of evolutionary pressure. It's not just about survival of the fittest, it's survival of the most inventive. Plants that can climb without trunks, defend without teeth, and reproduce without moving. Plants that whisper through chemistry, partner with fungi, and shape the weather itself. In the Amazon, being rooted doesn't mean being passive. It means being resilient, responsive, and quietly brilliant. Every tree, shrub, vine, and epiphyte is part of a dynamic system, a community of green minds thinking in slow motion. And while they may not chase, pounce, or fly, they command the stage all the same. After all, without the plants, there would be no stage at all. Just sunlight, soil, and a very awkward silence. Living in the Amazon rainforest is not exactly the same as renting a cozy woodland cottage with squirrels for neighbors and the occasional breezy afternoon picnic. It's more like being part of a wild, relentless game show where the rules change daily, the contestants are always evolving, and no one ever really wins for long. Survival here is a full-time job, whether you're a beetle trying not to be lunch, a sloth hoping not to be spotted, or a seed trying to land in the one patch of soil that hasn't already been claimed by something with thorns, teeth, or fungal ambitions. But survive they do, and not just survive, but thrive. Life in the Amazon is incredibly diverse because it's incredibly hard. The challenges create opportunity. Every organism, from microscopic fungi to towering trees, from gliding frogs to ambush hunting cats, is finely tuned to this intricate web of competition, cooperation, and climate. And for humans who have lived in and alongside the forest for thousands of years, it's been a lesson in observation, patience, and deep respect for the natural world. Let's begin with the basics: finding food. When you live in a place where edible options grow on trees or climb up them, it might seem like a buffet, but rainforest life isn't quite that generous. Much of the fruit, bark, and leaves in the forest are defended. Some are toxic, some are bitter, some look delicious but could turn your stomach inside out. This is not a salad bar, it's a chemistry lab with a mischievous streak. Herbivores have evolved elaborate digestive systems to handle this. Sloths, for example, have multi-chambered stomachs filled with symbiotic bacteria that break down the tough fibrous leaves they prefer. It's a slow process which matches their slow lifestyle. The sloth's entire digestive rhythm is practically in glacial time. It can take up to a month to digest a single meal. But that's the trade-off. They avoid competition by eating what others can't. Monkeys are more nimble foragers. Many are generalists, meaning they eat a little bit of everything: fruit, leaves, seeds, flowers, and the occasional insect. Their sharp eyes and agile limbs allow them to move quickly through the canopy, inspecting food sources and avoiding danger. Some even crack nuts with rocks or strip bark to reach sap. Capuchin monkeys are particularly notorious for being inventive. They've been seen washing food, using tools, and cracking open shellfish. In the rainforest, being curious isn't just a personality trait, it's a survival skill. Carnivores, meanwhile, have their own strategies. Jaguars, as previously mentioned, hunt by stealth and strength, often stalking quietly until the last possible second. Harpy eagles perch high above, watching for the slightest movement below. And snakes, like the boa constrictor, lie in wait, blending into the leaf litter until the perfect moment to strike. Patience here is more than a virtue, it's essential. But survival isn't just about food. Shelter is just as critical, especially when the weather can shift from sunny serenity to biblical downpour in minutes. For many animals, the forest itself provides a range of housing options. Birds nest in tree hollows or construct elaborate woven baskets of twigs, moss, and spider silk. Insects burrow into bark or build mud homes on branches. Bats roost upside down beneath leaves or in caves, often in groups for warmth and safety. Frogs take a more creative approach. Some species lay their eggs in the water-filled cups of bromeliads high in the canopy. The tadpoles grow up in these miniature pools, safe from the larger predators below. Some frog parents even return to feed their young with unfertilized eggs, a kind of amphibian baby food delivery service. It's not easy raising kids in the rainforest, but innovation helps. Even fish have to be adaptable. In the flooded forest during the wet season, they swim among tree trunks, feasting on fallen fruit and seeds. Some species, like the tambaqui, have molar-like teeth to crack nuts. It's a fish with a dental plan. When the water recedes, they retreat to deeper channels where they wait out the dry months. Timing and movement become key. Being in the right place at the right season can mean the difference between feasting and famine. But perhaps the most important and least visible aspect of survival in the rainforest is symbiosis. In the Amazon, relationships matter. Plants often team up with fungi, which help them absorb nutrients. Some ants live in mutualistic relationships with trees, protecting their leafy homes from herbivores and being rewarded with nectar or shelter. Leafcutter ants cultivate fungus gardens underground, feeding their crop with freshly cut leaves. It's agriculture on a miniature six-legged scale. Even predators and prey are locked into complex dances of coevolution. As prey animals develop better camouflage or sharper senses, their predators evolve better stealth, speed, or strategies. It's a continuous loop of one-upmanship that drives the diversity and complexity of the rainforest. No species exists in isolation. Every movement, every adaptation has consequences somewhere else in the ecosystem. For humans, surviving in the Amazon has always meant learning from this complexity rather than trying to conquer it. Indigenous communities have developed extraordinary knowledge of the forest's flora and fauna. They know which plants cure fevers, which vines carry drinking water, which frogs are safe to touch, and which should be admired from a safe distance. Their calendars are tuned not by numbered months, but by the fruiting of trees, the migration of fish, and the blooming of flowers. Hunting and gathering in the rainforest requires patience, observation, and an intimate understanding of animal behavior. It's not a matter of setting traps and waiting. It's knowing where a tapir might pass after a storm. It's recognizing the alarm calls of monkeys that might signal a nearby predator or opportunity. It's understanding the nesting cycles of birds, the patterns of insect emergence, and the tracks left in the mud by a nocturnal visitor. In many communities, children learn by following adults, watching, listening, asking questions, and slowly acquiring the skills needed to live in balance with the forest. It's not education in the classroom sense. It's immersion, passed down through stories, songs, and practical experience. And while modern influences have certainly made their way into the Amazon, motorboats, radios, mobile phones, the foundational knowledge of the forest remains essential for many. Resilience here doesn't mean resisting change. It means flowing with it. The Amazon is a place of cycles, dry and wet seasons, floods and fires, feast and scarcity. To survive, life must bend, stretch, and sometimes reinvent itself entirely. Some fish survive dry periods by burrowing into mud. Some plants drop their leaves to conserve water. Some animals migrate, while others hunker down and wait it out. Flexibility is more valuable than brute strength. Even death plays a vital role. Fallen trees become nurseries for seedlings. Decaying leaves feed fungi and insects. Dead animals nourish scavengers and enrich the soil. Nothing is wasted. Everything is reused, reabsorbed, and repurposed. Survival is not just about staying alive, it's about becoming part of the ongoing story of the forest. For all its danger, the rainforest is also a place of cooperation, timing, and incredible resourcefulness. Creatures here don't just endure, they adapt in spectacular fashion. Some disguise themselves as leaves or twigs. Others glow, leap, spin webs, release chemicals, or mimic predators to avoid becoming prey. Plants call in help from ants. Birds build decoy nests. Even spiders can adjust the size and shape of their webs depending on the conditions. It's a place where creativity is baked into biology. The forest doesn't favor the strongest or the fastest. It favors the clever, the cautious, the well-timed, and the lucky, and maybe the slightly weird. Because in the Amazon, weird is often wonderful. A bird that eats clay to detoxify its diet. A monkey that uses crushed insects as natural mosquito repellent. A frog that changes color depending on its mood, or possibly just to match the foliage. These aren't oddities, they're solutions. Ingenious responses to a set of challenges so intricate that no single strategy ever works for long. That's the real secret of survival in the Amazon. It's not just about overcoming nature, it's about listening to it. Blending in, reaching out, evolving when necessary, and staying still when that's the better choice. It's a game with no finish line, no final level, just an ever-changing landscape where those who survive best are those who adapt the most. And in the middle of it all, life doesn't just endure, it flourishes, quietly, noisily, unexpectedly, always. In the Amazon, time flows differently. Not because the clocks run slower, though if you're deep enough into the forest, you'll find that timekeeping becomes delightfully irrelevant, but because the cycles of life here operate on scales both ancient and immediate. The rainforest is at once a place of ceaseless motion and quiet continuity. Every raindrop, every fallen leaf, every shift in temperature or soil pH plays a role in shaping the great living engine that hums across 9 countries and millions of square kilometers. It is, quite simply, one of the most influential ecosystems on Earth. And it's fragile. Not fragile in the sense of being weak. After all, the forest has survived mass extinctions, ice ages, and continental shifts, but fragile in the way that complex systems can be, where every part depends on the others. When one piece is removed, another can falter. Remove enough, and the whole thing can tilt, warp, or collapse entirely. This is the paradox of the Amazon. It is vast, resilient, and powerful, yet vulnerable to the decisions of a species that arrived only recently on the ecological stage. Us. The modern relationship between humanity and the Amazon is complicated, shaped by necessity, curiosity, industry, and sometimes sheer oversight. The forest has long been a source of life and livelihood for indigenous peoples who have lived sustainably in and around it for thousands of years, but the past century has seen a shift toward extraction on a scale never before witnessed, driven by global demand for wood, beef, soy, gold, oil, and land. Deforestation, once a slow trickle of human activity, became a flood. In the second half of the 20th century, highways were carved through once inaccessible regions, opening up new areas to logging and ranching. Trees, some hundreds of years old, were felled to make room for cattle pastures and monoculture crops. Satellite images began capturing stark patterns of loss, jagged lines of clear-cut forest, fragments of green isolated like islands in a sea of brown. Between the years 1970 and 2020, nearly 20% of the original Amazon forest was lost. That's millions of hectares gone. This kind of change doesn't happen quietly. It reverberates through the entire biome. Without trees, the soil erodes quickly, losing the thin layer of nutrients that supports plant life. Rivers become clogged with sediment. The air becomes drier. Without the canopy to intercept and cycle rainwater, rainfall patterns shift, not just in the Amazon, but across South America and beyond. Some regions that once relied on the Amazon's flying rivers to bring moisture are now experiencing longer dry seasons and more erratic weather. Even as far away as the Andes, changes in precipitation have been linked to changes in forest cover. And then there's the carbon. The Amazon stores hundreds of billions of tons of carbon in its biomass. Trees are essentially giant living batteries, soaking up atmospheric carbon dioxide and locking it away in trunks, branches, and leaves. But when those trees are burned or allowed to decay after being cut, that carbon is released. The Amazon, once a powerful carbon sink, is at risk of becoming a carbon source. Some regions already emit more carbon than they absorb due to a combination of deforestation, drought, and fire. It's a dangerous tipping point, one that scientists have been warning about for decades. But while the headlines often focus on loss, there's another story running quietly alongside it. One of resilience, innovation, and hope. Conservation efforts, both local and global, have begun to push back. National parks, indigenous territories, and conservation corridors now protect significant portions of the forest. Brazil's indigenous communities, in particular, have proven to be some of the most effective stewards of the rainforest. Studies have shown that lands under indigenous control experience dramatically lower rates of deforestation compared to other areas. When people with deep-rooted knowledge and cultural connection to the forest are empowered to protect it, the results speak volumes. Technology is also playing a role. High-resolution satellite imagery, artificial intelligence, and drone surveillance are now being used to monitor deforestation in real time. Conservation organizations and governments can respond faster to illegal activity, and journalists can access visual data that tells the story in undeniable detail. It's difficult to argue that nothing is happening when the evidence is written in pixels from space. Sustainable industries are growing as well. Communities are cultivating native crops like acai, Brazil nuts, and cacao in ways that preserve forest cover. Ecotourism, when done thoughtfully, offers income while reinforcing the value of keeping the forest intact. And the potential of the Amazon's biodiversity as a source of medicine and scientific insight remains vast. Less than 1% of the plant species in the rainforest have been studied for their pharmaceutical potential. Somewhere out there, among the mosses and vines, could be the next treatment for a disease that hasn't even been named yet. Then there's reforestation, the art and science of putting the forest back. Replanting trees sounds simple, but restoring a rainforest is a delicate process. It's not just about planting seedlings. It's about understanding which species work together, how the soil has changed, how water moves across the land, and what roles fungi, insects, and seed dispersers will play. In some regions, nature can rebound on its own, given time and protection. In others, active restoration is needed, and when done well, the results can be extraordinary. In just a few decades, degraded landscapes can begin to look and function like forest again, drawing back wildlife, improving local climate, and even reconnecting fragments of ecosystem that were once separated. Policy also matters. In the early 2000s, Brazil dramatically reduced deforestation rates through a combination of enforcement, monitoring, and economic incentives. Though progress has been uneven in recent years, it showed what's possible when political will, scientific insight, and public engagement align. Other Amazonian nations have also begun to prioritize conservation, recognizing that protecting the rainforest is not just an environmental issue, it's a social, economic, and global one. International cooperation is increasingly essential. Climate agreements, carbon credit markets, and sustainability pledges are all part of a growing toolkit for rainforest protection. But these efforts only work when they're backed by transparency and enforcement. It's not enough to promise trees. They have to stand. They have to be seen. They have to grow year after year under skies thick with moisture and soil rich with decay and renewal. At its heart, the Amazon doesn't ask for much. It asks to be allowed to do what it's always done: grow, cycle, breathe, evolve. It doesn't need to be redesigned, reinvented, or maximized for output. It simply needs space, respect, and time. And if we give it those things, it gives back more than we can measure. Stable climate, clean air, fresh water, medicines, food, and the quiet knowledge that somewhere, a forest older than empires is still doing its quiet work. The future of the Amazon is still being written. It's a story that involves scientists and activists, indigenous elders and young students, farmers, artists, politicians, and every person who's ever looked at a tree and felt something stir. It's not a story of despair, it's a story of thresholds, of how close we come, how far we pull back, and how clearly we can imagine a future where the forest thrives not just in legend, but in living, breathing reality. Because in the end, the Amazon is not a place that belongs to the past. It is not a relic, a postcard, or a poetic idea. It is present, urgent, alive. A system of astonishing complexity and quiet strength, still standing beneath the clouds, still weaving sunlight into oxygen, still sheltering secrets that could change the world. Whether or not we give it the chance to continue, that is the part of the story that belongs to us. The Amazon is often described in sweeping, almost mythical terms: an emerald ocean, the lungs of the earth, the last great wilderness. But tucked between those sweeping vines and river bends lies something a bit more down to earth: culture. Not just the natural culture of ecosystems, but human culture, shaped by and woven into the very fabric of the forest. For thousands of years, the Amazon has been more than just a backdrop for survival. It has been a home, a teacher, a storyteller, and in many ways, a living library of knowledge. When people imagine the Amazon, they often picture it as untouched and uninhabited, a vast green void waiting for discovery. But in reality, the forest has been home to indigenous communities long before any explorers arrived with maps and questions. These communities have shaped the landscape, stewarded it, and drawn from it not just food and shelter, but language, tradition, identity, and meaning. There are more than 400 distinct indigenous groups living in the Amazon today, spread across Brazil, Peru, Colombia, Ecuador, Bolivia, and other countries within the basin. Each group brings its own language, customs, myths, and ecological knowledge, many of which are unique to specific regions and ecosystems. Some languages have no written form, relying entirely on oral storytelling to pass history down through generations, and those stories are rich, layered, and intimately tied to the forest. To the people who live here, the rainforest is not simply nature, it is animate. It has character, intention, and memory. Spirits reside in rivers, trees, animals, and wind. The boundary between the material and spiritual world is porous, often navigated by shamans and elders who act as interpreters between the human and non-human worlds. It's a worldview that doesn't separate people from nature, but sees them as entangled, part of the same breathing organism. Many indigenous cosmologies place their origins within the forest. Creation stories are told in the language of leaves, animals, and rivers. One group may believe that the first people emerged from a giant tree, another that humans were once fish who learned to walk the land. These stories are not just metaphors, they are maps. They encode information about how to live, what to eat, how to navigate the seasons, how to relate to other beings, and how to avoid upsetting the balance of things. This balance is not just spiritual, it's practical. Generations of experience have taught these communities how to cultivate forest resources without exhausting them. Farming practices like slash and mulch agriculture may look primitive to outsiders, but they are finely tuned systems that create fertile soil, encourage biodiversity, and minimize ecological disruption. In some areas, indigenous management has actually increased biodiversity. Certain parts of the Amazon have unusually high concentrations of useful plants, fruit trees, and medicinal herbs, many of which are believed to have been purposefully planted or encouraged by human hands centuries ago. One of the most striking examples of this is the presence of terra preta, or dark earth, scattered throughout parts of the Amazon. These are patches of unusually rich black soil that contrast sharply with the generally poor soil typical of the rainforest. Scientists now believe these were created by ancient Amazonians through the careful mixing of charcoal, food waste, and other organic matter. These human-made soils are still fertile today, sometimes hundreds of years after they were first created. It's a reminder that humans haven't just lived in the forest, they've improved it. Food is another window into the deep relationship between people and forest. Many of the staples used in modern cooking, cassava, cacao, peanuts, chili peppers, have their roots in Amazonian domestication. These were not stumbled upon by accident. They were observed, selected, cultivated, and shared over generations. Cassava, for example, comes in two types, sweet and bitter. Bitter cassava contains dangerous levels of cyanide if not processed correctly. Yet indigenous groups developed elaborate methods to detoxify it, grating, washing, pressing, and fermenting the roots until they're safe to eat. It's a culinary process so complex and precise, it's practically alchemy. And it speaks to an intimate trial-and-error relationship with the land built over countless seasons. Medicine, too, has long been drawn from the forest's pharmacy. Indigenous healers, often called shamans or curanderos, use hundreds of plant species to treat ailments, ranging from fevers to infections to broken bones and emotional distress. Their knowledge comes not from textbooks, but from direct observation, tradition, and what they describe as communication with the spirits of the plants themselves. Western medicine has only just begun to scratch the surface of what these systems understand. Quinine, the anti-malarial compound, came from the bark of a tree native to the Amazon. Curare, once used in blowgun darts and now in anesthesia, is another forest gift. Countless other compounds remain undiscovered, growing quietly in places that might vanish before they are understood. But culture is more than just knowledge. It is celebration, identity, creativity, and belonging. Many communities mark the rhythms of the forest with festivals and ceremonies, some for planting, others for harvest, some to honor ancestors, or to ask permission from the spirits before hunting or fishing. Music, dance, and storytelling are integral. A single myth might be passed down in dozens of versions, each one suited to a different age group or ceremonial moment. Songs might mimic the calls of birds or the rustling of trees. Body painting, featherwork, and traditional dress reflect not only aesthetics but stories, symbolic languages that are worn rather than spoken. Language itself carries the DNA of place. Some indigenous languages include words for types of rain, different kinds of silence, or directions that shift depending on the river's current. There are verbs for things Western languages barely acknowledge, like the act of listening to a tree or the sound of a fruit falling into water. These aren't poetic inventions, they're practical descriptors for life in a world where every sound, smell, and pattern has meaning. Unfortunately, these cultural threads are increasingly at risk. Language loss is one of the most urgent threats. As younger generations shift toward dominant national languages, Portuguese, Spanish, or English, many traditional languages are disappearing. When a language is lost, so too are the stories, the ecological knowledge, the naming systems, and the ways of seeing the world that language made possible. It's not just a shift in words, it's the end of a worldview. Deforestation and displacement also take a heavy toll. As land is cleared and waterways polluted, the resources that sustain these communities dwindle. Cultural practices tied to specific trees, animals, or seasonal patterns may become impossible to continue. And when people are forced from their territories, they lose not just their homes, but their connection to the very landscape that defines who they are. Yet, there is resilience. Many indigenous communities are reclaiming language, reviving ceremonies, documenting oral histories, and fighting for legal recognition of their territories. Young leaders are using digital tools to share stories, advocate for their rights, and connect across borders. Cultural survival is not about resisting modernity. It's about maintaining continuity while navigating change. It's about adapting without forgetting. There is much the world can learn from the Amazon's human cultures, about sustainability, reciprocity, humility, and the value of paying attention. The idea that we must dominate nature, that forests are blank canvases waiting to be developed, is a relatively recent and narrow perspective. For millennia, people in the Amazon have operated under a different model, one of relationship. They don't see the forest as separate from themselves, but as kin, a living system of which they are a part. That kind of relationship demands listening, not just with ears, but with respect, with curiosity, with the understanding that the forest has its own stories, and that those who have lived there the longest might just be the best ones to help us hear them. The culture of the Amazon is not a relic or a romantic ideal. It is alive, evolving, and essential, not just to the people who call it home, but to a world trying to remember how to live in balance once again. And now, as we gently draw this journey to a close, perhaps you find yourself lying there, eyes half closed, thoughts tangled with vines and birdsong, still drifting through the misty forest paths of the Amazon. We've wandered together through its canopy cathedrals, listened to its nighttime symphonies, marveled at the cleverness of its creatures, and tiptoed through its cultural treasures and quiet revolutions. All of it, breathing, pulsing, alive. The Amazon is many things: a greenhouse of evolution, a cradle of culture, a masterclass in cooperation, resilience, and adaptation. But more than anything, it's a reminder that life, at its most intricate, most bizarre, most beautiful, doesn't need to be forced. It grows where it can, stretches toward the light, and makes a living out of the impossible. And now I'm left wondering, where are you right now? Curled up under the covers in London, swaying gently in a hammock in Sao Paulo, hiding from daylight in a cozy apartment in Toronto or Tokyo, or a tiny village I've never even heard of? What time is it for you? Late evening, past midnight, or that magical hour just before dawn when everything is still? If you're still awake, I hope this little expedition hasn't been too interesting, though if it has kept you from sleep, I do hope it's also left you with something to dream about. And if you did drift off somewhere along the way, that's perfectly fine too. That's what the Sleepy Scientist is here for. If you enjoyed this journey through the rainforest's secret life, it would mean the world to me if you could give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and maybe leave a comment telling me where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's always a joy to know where this sleepy little community is drifting off from. And finally, just a gentle reminder, this video is for educational and relaxation purposes only. It's not medical advice, and if you're experiencing any sleep difficulties or health concerns, a chat with a doctor or sleep specialist is always a good idea. Like a soft river, carry you wherever it needs to go. Good night,